So in any case, we did lots of research around what made sense, and we decided wireless was the right way to go. And even though Intel was pushing home RF in the standards committees, we decided to do Wi-Fi. We thought it was a better standard. And there's technical issues between the two that we felt strongly that Wi-Fi was the right way to go. And I had a big argument with Pat Gelsinger, who was CTO of Intel at the time. Actually, we had an argument about three things: FireWire versus USB 2. He won that one, but then he had some control over it because he took FireWire out of their chips. And RAM bus versus RDRAM, I won on that one on the RDRAM side, and Wi-Fi versus home RF, and I won the Wi-Fi. So I got 2 out of 3. Steve tried to charge Intel to use FireWire, and as for license fee, and Intel wasn't going to pay a license fee, and so they just dropped it out of their chips, and that was kind of the end of that.
Did that doom FireWire as a standard?
Basically, that doomed FireWire.
No other vendor was making the chips, or?
Well, we had suppliers for the chips. Okay. Intel wasn't making chips. They were going to incorporate it in their core, core chipset for a PC. They were going to add it to PCs, right? Because we had it in our higher end Macs, and if you were going to do video editing or anything like that, you needed it.
Oh, so FireWire could have been on PCs at some point.
It was. I mean, it was plug-in, but yes, it could have been standard in high-end PCs, actually in all PCs eventually, if we hadn't gotten a pissing contest with Intel. It was the first of several pissing contests. But in any case, we picked Wi-Fi. Had to go figure out where we were going to get the technology from. Did a sort of scoured the earth, and we found a small group up in the Netherlands that had been, I think, part of NCR and then sold to AT&T as part of the merger, and then had been spun out to Lucent, and they were kind of this little group up near Amsterdam. They were outside of Amsterdam someplace, and they were kind of doing their own thing, and they were doing Wi-Fi for industrial control, and a Wi-Fi card cost, a couple $1,000, and a base station cost around 10 grand, and they were happy doing their thing. And the standard there wasn't a IEEE standard yet. It was evolving still. It hadn't been declared yet, and so we found them, and we decided that was what we're going to use for the base foundation of our technology, and Lucent was doing a second generation version of it, with the chips that they were doing and stuff, and so we made a big decision that we were going to adopt that. Tim Cook did a great job negotiating a deal with them. I mean, he really, we spent a lot of time together over there working on this, and and he really convinced them to drop their drawers and give us pricing that was unbelievable, so that we could do, basically $100 plug-in cards and a couple $100 base stations, which was, dramatically different pricing than where it had started, which is what it would have taken to enable. So we made a decision that we were going to put it in the iBook first, because that was a portable product that was meant for education. And so while we were developing the iBook, we said, okay, iBook team, you now have to add antennas. And they went crazy, all right, because first of all, it was a big cost hit, right? I mean, they had to add connectors for you to plug in the card, and they had to add antennas into the product. And but because it was an all-plastic product, it was convenient to add antennas to. And so we did that.
Did you have to hire people, the RF specialists?
We had some already.
Okay.
All right, because ATG had been doing work on this for a while, on just wireless in general, not specifically Wi-Fi, right? And we tuned them down to Wi-Fi, but we did hire some people. Yeah, we hired some people, and we had some interesting people go through our Wi-Fi group over time. The guy who did Ubiquity, he was an intern in our group. And on the weekends, he was doing point-to-point internet base stations in his living room, and he spun that out as a business, and now they have a multi-billion-dollar business doing Wi-Fi stuff. But yeah, we hired some people in, but we had a core team that was already there doing wireless from the old ATG days, and so we got them, and we built it into the first iBook. I think one of the finest launches we did, the finest moments, was when Phil Schiller jumped off at Javits Center, jumped off the top of the scaffolding. So the shtick, we wanted to have a shtick, right? And so we had two things to do for the introduction. One was we had this big scaffolding. It was way up in the air, and then there was one of those bags down below that you use in the movies, right, to
Like
land on.
a pit, sort of.
Well, those airbags that you land on, right?
Right.
So so it blocks your fall.
Oh my gosh.
So we took an iBook, we put an accelerometer on it, right? We put Phil Schiller on top of it, and we threw him off of it to land on the airbag, and then wirelessly we broadcast the data from the accelerometer on the screen, so you could see him jumping and landing and everything.
Was he holding the computer?
He's holding the computer
Okay.
this way, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
But so so we come up with this idea, and Schiller, I mean, the running joke around Apple at the time was, Steve would say jump, and Phil Schiller would go, how high? And let me tell you, this was high. So we actually brought a professional stuntman in, right, to teach Phil how to jump off of you got to kick your legs, and then you got to roll your back, and so you got to land right, and you have to hold the iBook in a certain way, and it was a big drama to get this. So but it was a great demo. The morning of the show, we're rehearsing this, right, and the chief legal, the CEO or whatever of the Javits Center is there watching us do this, and he sees Schiller jump off this thing, and he goes, "Stop the show! You can't do that." Right? And so Nancy Heinen, who was there, got with their chief legal counsel, and on the back of her business card wrote a liability release for Javits, for Phil to jump off of it. In any case, Phil jumps off of it. I mean, no one ever seen anything like this before. And wirelessly broadcast the data, and then every fourth or fifth seat in the audience, we'd put an iBook below it. Right? And so then, Steve goes, okay, everyone reached, below, and we had Apple employees in the audience, right? And everyone pulled out their iBooks and started surfing the internet wirelessly in the audience. I mean, it was,
wow.
It was unbelievable.
That is
It was so cool.
spectacular.
And that's the beginning of Wi-Fi, right? Of commercial,
Really?
consumerized commercial
I had no
Wi-Fi,
idea.
consumer Wi-Fi. Yeah, 3 years ahead of Dell. Dell claimed, we're the first with Wi-Fi 3 years later, right? But we've been shipping it, and we put the antennas and the connectors and stuff, eventually in all the products, but the iBook was first, right? And then eventually we just built it in. We started working with Broadcom, with Ed Frank at Broadcom, and Ed did chips for us, so we could integrate it in, and eventually those integrated with Bluetooth and continual integration. But yeah, so that was sort of how Wi-Fi got going, and we shipped $20 million worth of antennas and connectors before Wi-Fi really got any real. That's a lot of connectors and a lot of antennas before it got any real traction.
Yeah. And then, so could you relate that maybe to Bluetooth and the different purposes they serve, and when?
Well, yeah, I mean, from our perspective,
when Bluetooth came on board.
Yeah, I mean, Wi-Fi was for networking, and in the beginning, the Bluetooth guys wanted to be for networking, and we kept telling them, no, you're peripheral connect. But they had delusions of grandeur, so we had to keep beating them down, right? And eventually, I think they finally embraced their role in society, right? Of being a peripheral connection instead of a network. Although I think they still occasionally get delusions of grandeur, but
because it's not obvious to me why you would need another network just for short range if you've already got
massive power difference.
Wi-Fi.
No, but it's a massive power difference.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Bluetooth is low power to really low power, depending on how you use it, right? Whereas Wi-Fi takes a lot of power, right? And so you don't need Wi-Fi for. I mean, you don't need all the stack and all that networking stack and stuff for an interconnect for peripherals. You don't want that. It's too much overhead, right? So Bluetooth's much simpler. It's much lower power. Frankly, we need something that's even lower than Bluetooth, and there's Zigbee and a whole bunch of other things that people are working on, but nothing's really gotten traction and stuff. I mean, I looked at a bunch of this when we first did the iPod stuff with Nike, and talking from your iPod to your shoe, because we used to have a little module in the shoe. You got one of those here in the museum. I gave you a pair of sneakers from the museum that the first pair that had the Nike Plus. But you need different interconnects for different purposes, right?
But has Bluetooth, why would you need one slower than Bluetooth, do you think?
Lower power.
Oh,
yeah,
even
Bluetooth uses a lot of power.
Even lower power.
Yeah, even lower power.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you want to run off battery that lasts 10 years.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Bluetooth, the battery lasts, a day, right, or a couple of days, right? You need something where the battery lasts 10 years, right? And so you need really low power communication stuff, and typically that's very low bandwidth too, So, those go together. But it's all about convergence of the right technology to go with the right purpose, and when those all come together. In any case, we start shipping this Wi-Fi thing, it's like magic, right? And it starts getting some real momentum. And, we got these base stations, and it's part of the Mac ecosystem. So it's, why people would buy Macs, not PCs, but I'm like, the PC industry at some point in time shifts to Wi-Fi. Because we've, the IEEE committee finishes the Wi-Fi standard, and you start getting, PCI cards with Wi-Fi on them for PCs, and they start putting them in them, and then you got, a couple of companies started building base stations, and
so Apple would have been on the relevant committees, right?
Yeah, we were on all the committees and
Yeah,
everything. Yeah,
right.
we did
And
all
did
that
your
stuff.
de facto work influence, like sort of
Yeah.
push things in your direction?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Already?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, so Home RF, the Home RF guys wanted to change the FCC standards to make it, better for Home RF versus, not as good for Wi-Fi, versus how they were currently. And so I spent a bunch of time in D.C. at the FCC and at the House Telecommunications Commission, talking to people about why they shouldn't change the standard and why Wi-Fi was the right way to go and why you shouldn't let Intel, change things.
Is
right?
that the Part 15 thing?
Yeah,
The one about interference with your TV and all that
No,
stuff?
no.
Okay.
This is specifics around the standard of the unlicensed band.
Oh,
Right. So
okay.
there's a bunch of requirements around the unlicensed
Yes.
band, and Intel wanted to change a few things around the unlicensed band to make Home RF work better, because Home RF spreads spectrum and or frequency hopping, and we're channel oriented, and so. There was some things around that Intel wanted to change. So I spent a bunch of time with, Powell, who was running the FCC at the time, and the other FCC commissioners, and the CTO of the FCC, who ended up at Cisco a few years later. Really smart guy. I forget his name. And then some of the people on the House Telecom. In any case, we had him off at the pass. Wi-Fi became sort of the de facto standard. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is a big business. Right, our base stations could be used because we're just a PCI card, right? So we could take our PCI card that goes in our Mac, plug it into a PC. We could take our base station. We're missing one thing, and that's the application that runs on a PC to configure the base station. It's not a big deal. We weren't using browser-based stuff at the time, right? These were all custom apps, right? So we had a custom app on the Mac. So I go to Steve and I said, look, I need 3-4 people. I'm going to port our custom app on the Mac over to, a PC version so we can enter the base station business in the PC. Steve goes, over my dead body. I said, but Steve, it's like 3-4 people. We already have it running. We just need to productize it. No. All right. So I'm like, all right. No. I had lots of other things to do. So,
Did he give you any reason? Or?
He thought that was part of the Mac ecosystem and
Oh,
didn't want to.
It was unique.
It was unique to the Mac
value
ecosystem,
proposition.
value proposition.
Yeah.
Our base stations were better than anyone else's. They were. They had lots of features no one else had. We had mesh. No one else had mesh. Until Aero came out recently, no one else really did mesh. We had that. We had easy configuration. There was no SSID, right? It was the name of a network, right? It was Mac-like. Right? Everything was simple. Right? You had a simple name, password. It wasn't, it wasn't this bizarre shit you got on the PC side of things. So I wanted to build a multi-billion-dollar. I said this could be a multi-billion. I want to build a multi-billion-dollar, networking business, right? And Steve went, no way, we're not doing that. So I said, all right. So we're not doing that. So kind of put that aside, right? And which then came when we did the iPod later on. I dug my heels in, and we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But so that was sort of Wi-Fi. I'm like super proud of what we did there. It was like so special, and think about the world. We never figured. We knew it would do really well in homes and in schools, but we named it Airport Base Station, but that wasn't because we thought it was going to actually be in airports. Right? That was never in our thinking. Starbucks, McDonald's. We never thought about it that way, right? And anyone who says we did isn't, is fibbing, right? Because we didn't think that big, right? This was how do we sell more Macs? That was our goal here, right? Is we had such a small market share, we wanted to sell more Macs, and we were searching for any way we can to get people to buy more Macs and to love the Mac even more, right? And so this was one of the ways to get more into education, to get more in the consumer base.
So within the Apple ecosystem or the Mac ecosystem, could basically every device talk to? Was every device Wi-Fi enabled?
Eventually, I mean, we went around the quadrants,
Okay.
right? And we started with the iBook, and then we went to the Power Mac, you know, then the Power Book, and then the iMac, right? So you know, we just kind of worked our way around as we were doing future product releases, kind of in the order of product release, we were adding it, and so we'd have to add initially we added a PCI slot and an antenna into the product, and then eventually we just integrated it in completely. And look, this led to issues, right? I mean, you know, iPhone antenna gate has a long history behind it, right? Because we did the first the first metal iBook was the titanium iBook. I mean, PowerBook, right? The first PowerBook with Wi-Fi was a titanium PowerBook, and its antenna performance sucked because it was a metal enclosure. And I said we need a slot this big to get the antenna performance. And Johnny and Steve didn't want a slot that big because it didn't look good. So we had a smaller slot, shitty antenna performance, right? And that gets repeated, you know, over and over in history, you know, and culminates in antenna gate, right? So on the iPhone. But no, we ran it around all the products. So within, I don't remember how long it took us, but you know, within a year, 2 years, whatever, year and a half, all of our products were Wi-Fi ready, and then we just started building it in, right? You know, into products where it just came in like as default in the product.
So I want to pick up on something you just said, which is you want to strip this big, but it really needs to be that so big, whatever. Can you describe how the ID team and the engineers would have worked together? Like the engineers just looking, or is it maybe it's just you and Johnny?
No, it was the engineers on both sides, and then it would bounce up to me and Johnny.
Okay, yes. Yeah. So they would look at the proposed antenna topology, and the engineers are just going,
we need a slot like this.
This is not going to
ID
work.
would go no.
And the design guys would go, I don't like the way it looks.
Right.
So.
Well, they would do an ID, we would do a design.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the ID team, the engineering team, you know, the Johnny's team would do an ID, the engineering team would be doing design at the same time. Then we put them together, right? And sometimes stuff didn't work.
And this is where the trade-offs have to.
And that's where the trade-offs.
The horse trading,
right?
Yeah.
And so I'd fight with Steve all the time about those trade-offs, right? And you know, sometimes I'd win, sometimes I'd lose, right? And you know, so that was when I lost. And you know, we paid the price for it because the performance, antenna performance in titanium PowerBooks were shitty. Right, it's too bad.
By the way, just out of my personal curiosity, is an antenna that was coming out the back on its own PC or its own?
No, it was built into the enclosure.
No, I know, but sometimes, and I think as you said initially, they were cards with an external.
No, but it didn't have an external antenna.
Oh, you did not?
We always built the antenna in.
Oh, okay.
Right, so if you look at an iBook, original toilet seat iBook, right, you could see the antenna wires up against the plastic around the corners of the top of the display, behind the display. Right, you could see the wires, and then it came down, and then it had a little RF plug that would plug into the card. But that was all inside. We never put anything outside. There was some versions of the airport base station that we sold an external antenna for, where you could plug an antenna in and stick it up on top of a shelf, kind of thing. That was just an accessory. Yeah.
I was just curious how an internal antenna compares to a separate freestanding. I shouldn't stick my hand there. Separate freestanding. Rubber antenna this high or something. I mean,
depends how good the antenna engineers are.
I guess so, yeah.
Right. If they're good enough, it shouldn't make a difference.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Yeah.
So, like with antenna gate, since you brought that up, is that, the solution was really to sort of modify the user behavior,
Well, that's not really a good solution.
To hold it differently?
Yeah, that was the initial answer. But,
that was the initial answer.
That's not a good answer.
And
good answer is to design the product so that the antenna works.
So did they
I wasn't there at the time, so I don't know.
I was just curious.
But there's a long history behind these trade-offs and not always getting made in the right direction.
Right. That's really interesting.
So that's kind of the Wi-Fi story, and it was. Again, we did it to sell more Macs, right? And we had no idea it was going to become such a thing. And it's great because everywhere I go, I'm connected now. It's awesome.
It's so interesting how the pieces come together.
Yeah.
And in a way, the smartphone is kind of integrated everything.
Yeah.
In a way. Anyway, is it time for the iPod yet?
Well, we did lots of products.
What
right?
did you do between?
We did we did
we
did the G5 Power Mac, which was a really high-end product, which was a great product. That was a real slog with IBM, who did the processor, G5 processor for it, but it was it was an amazing product. We did lots of PowerBooks. Kind of in the middle of all this, we start brainstorming, Steve and I and Phil and a few other people start brainstorming about, okay, we have our quadrants. How do we get people to adopt the Mac? How do we create an ecosystem that people adopt the Mac for? And what peripherals do we have to have, to make the Mac special? And Sina Tamadin, who no one's ever heard of, right? But Sina's, basically, I ran product development, Avi ran the operating system, Sina ran all the applications. So all those applications you love, the guy who did them is Sina.
Could you spell their name?
Sina, S-I-N-A, Sina
Thank you.
Tamadin, right? T-A-M-A-D-D-O-N. Right, and Sina had been with us at Next. Sina had been at Sun originally, and was like sales support or something at Sun, and then joined Next in sales support, and but Sina is a natural product guy, right? And he loves, audio, video, all that stuff. Just loves it, and has a very good sense of products. He's a very quiet guy, and so when shortly after Next was acquired, he wasn't part of the original group, but then Steve brought him on to kind of help out with stuff. Same thing with Nancy Heinen, joined later as well. But so Sina took over the applications. Right? There weren't any really in the beginning, right? And so Sina started, the first one was iMovie, I think, right? I think was the first one, right? And that was, we take FireWire. Sony cameras have FireWire. You can plug it into a Power Mac, which has FireWire. We basically bought, there was an application that had been developed at Supermac under Steve Blank's reign. It had been sold off to Macromedia, and then we bought it, Sina bought it from Macromedia, right? Or got the team or some variation. And they basically redid it all, and that's what became iMovie. Right. And so we were doing the movie editing and stuff like that on the on the Mac, and I think it came about because the guys who everyone was using at the time, it was a company in Boston, I forget the name, but they were going PC because they'd given up on the Mac, and so we decided we'll have to do this stuff ourselves. So we started doing a lot of the apps ourselves. So the first one was iMovie, then iDVD, right, any case, we need to do music. HP caught us with our pants down, right? And with the rip, mix, burn stuff, right? I mean, they put CD burning in their high-end towers for the PC group, and we didn't have that yet. So we did a quick scramble, and we bought this small company that had been ex-Apple guys who had been doing a music app. And Sina bought them, and that's what became iTunes. Right? We retooled it for iTunes, and we took it into the Power Mac first because the only CD burning drives were full height, and the only product we had, because everything tried to get miniaturized, the only full height product we had was the tower. So it went into the tower first. I think it was probably the G4 tower, but I don't remember. You can look all that up. And so it goes in the tower. And we start doing this video editing stuff, right? And music collection, right? And so we have the rip, mix, burn thing, and through that development we start playing with the portable music players. So we looked at video cameras, we looked at still cameras, we looked at cell phones, we looked at pocket organizers. And music players, and maybe one or two other things. And the idea was, that the Mac was the center of your digital universe, right? And that the Mac made that device that much better because the software on the Mac enhanced the experience of using that device. So, that's basically what iMovie did with the Sony cameras. It used to be you could take, video camera as much as you want, and then what'd you do with it? It sat on a tape in a drawer someplace, right? But the ability to download that into a computer and then actually edit it, right, and create your own movie from it was dramatic, improvement in value to having that camera. Same thing with still cameras, right? And eventually that ended up being iPhoto, right? Which Cena did as well. So the music thing. So we're doing this music thing. We know we're going to roll CD burning into all of our products eventually. I'm busy working on a CD burning version for the iMac. It took a long time because it had to be slot load. Steve had twisted my arm into doing the next generation of iMac with a slot load drive instead of the tray load. We had a big fight, and he finally put his arm around me and said, "We're best friends. Do this for me as a personal favor." And it wasn't the wrong thing to do, but it wasn't the right thing to do. And so I'm okay, Steve, we'll do it. But that meant that it took us longer to get CD burning into the iMac. But we got into the bigger products first, and then eventually it came, and into the portable products because they used tray load, and the earlier ones used tray load. So we're all playing with these music players, and they just suck. Right? There's little tiny ones from Nike and from Philips.
Sorry, at this time, were you thinking of accommodating other people's peripherals or making your own?
Yeah, we were thinking about everything.
Or making your own as well?
Well, we were accommodating other people's cameras, other people's
Right,
video
but they're
cameras.
MP3
But we wanted to find something that we could do ourselves.
Okay.
That we could build an experience that would blow everybody away.
So you
Right.
you weren't just trying to accommodate everyone else's MP3 players. You eventually decided, wow.
Well, we started off as how do we make everyone else's MP3 players much better, and then we realized they all suck. We better do it ourselves.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so I put together a team just to investigate. Mike Culbert, who was CTO, who's unfortunately gone now, but Mike is probably one of the smartest technology guys I'd ever met. He was on the Newton team. He did like all the power management for the Intel versions of the Macs. I mean, he did like such dramatic, important work. So he helped out with that. Had Stan Ing, who was the marketing guy. I mean, there's a small core group of people who, and I worked on it. Core group of people kind of worked on the concept and what we do. And so there was little shitty products, Philips and Nike and and a handful of, and then there was these really big products, Creative Labs and other people. And they were big disk drive based, USB 1 based, so they were really slow. It would take you 10 hours to load the content, and they were big and heavy. Right, and you couldn't run with them. You couldn't, because they had to sit on a tabletop because they were not portable really. So we had all these products and they were terrible. So we kind of said, okay, let's look at doing it. And the first look we took was in late '99 probably, because I'm thinking we released in 2001. No, so it would have been late 2000, mid 2000. I'm losing track of time. But it took us a little over a year to do the first one. Came out in 2001, so it would have been 2000. Yeah, so late '99 we started looking at this stuff and playing with it, and we couldn't find something that really worked. Yeah, it's probably mid 2000. Couldn't find something that really worked.
Would you say the storage issue was the main
Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of different things, but the storage issue was the big one. And we had FireWire, right? So we had the solution, and almost all of our products, not the lowest end ones, but almost all the products had FireWire in them. Right? Maybe even the lowest end ones had it. I forget. But we had FireWire, right? Which means you could load the content really quickly. We needed a small, cheap display. We needed a small, cheap battery. We needed a processor, right? And we needed storage. So I started scrounging around for all this stuff and trying to put the pieces together. And I was hanging out at Almaden, IBM Research, because I was friends with Nick D'Onofrio, and Nick said, "Come on by, take a look at our technology, see if there's anything you want to use." So I took a look and I saw the microdrive when it was under development. And I reached out to the microdrive group and said, hey, I need, 5 gigabytes and, this price. And they laughed at me, right? Never going to happen. I'm like, all right. And, so I said, okay, good, no problem, and so I kept looking, and eventually I was in Japan and found the Toshiba drive. And they weren't really sure what to do with it because didn't have enough capacity to really go in a PC, right? And I was there, and they were taking us through their roadmap for all of our other products. And at the end of the meeting, they go, we have this other thing. Would you like to take a look at it? We're like, yeah, sure, we'll take a look at it. So we looked at it, and it's obvious, right? This is how to make an iPod, right? And Jeff Williams is there with me, and I'm like, Jeff, we need to get all of these. So Jeff goes, well, yeah, well, we think we have an idea we can use this. How many of them can you make? And can we get an exclusive? And he started the whole exclusive conversation. So, Steve was in Tokyo, so I said, Steve, I've told this story lots of times, but I need a $10 million check to go do the development on this. And Steve goes, no problem, I'll write you the check. So then I talked to Fred to make sure the check won't bounce, because Steve, Fred was the guy who actually wrote the check, not Steve. And Fred goes, go ahead, the check won't bounce. And so Jeff negotiated an exclusive on the drive. While we'd been over there, we'd found batteries and displays. So because the cell phone industry had really started taking off with remember, cell phones used to have single line displays. And it had just been recent at that point in time that the bigger displays, black and white, they were not color, they were black and white, displays had started becoming available. Same thing with battery technology, right? The lithium ion battery technology had just started getting incorporated in cell phones. So there was this convergence of great technologies, right? And the form factor was self-evident. It was going to be about the size of a pack of cards, because if you took the display and the battery and the circuit board and the hard drive and the connectors you needed on either side, that defined the form factor, all right? And so we had a basic design. We had to find a processor. We had to assemble a team to actually go do the work. Johnny and his team started working on an ID, and we'd get together and brainstorm about, with Steve and Johnny and Phil and I and a couple other people would brainstorm about, how does it all go together. And Phil Schiller's the one who came up with the scroll wheel. He had a B&O phone, an old B&O phone that had the scroll wheel, right? And they didn't have acceleration though, but so we grabbed that idea, we patented it right away. And we actually ended up licensing that patent back to B&O. I don't think they really knew that we'd lifted it from them. But that validated our patent, which was really good. And I started looking for assembling a team. And I started pulling resources from various parts of the group, although the iPod team was going to leverage all the other teams, as far as the disk drive group and the display group and the power supply group and the interface group and the various kinds of I/O and we needed to put a core team together to do the processor for it, and then a software team to do the low-level software. Sina's team was going to do the user interface for it, but we need to put sort of an operating system and a the basic underpinnings of the middleware that would support the GUI. And so Sina's team started working on a GUI for it, and we started working on the low-level software. So I needed someone to manage the team, and so I started going through there wasn't anyone at Apple I wanted to do it, because all the really good people I had at Apple, I couldn't pull off of what they were working on, right? I mean, it was too important that they get the quadrants, the airport base station, the displays, all that stuff needed to get out. We were in a very critical time in the company. And so I decided to go outside and take a look outside. So I called Lsi Logic, who was one of the managers who'd worked for me at Next, and Ali's a great engineering manager. And he was at Sun at the time. Actually, he was at some company that was getting acquired by Sun, or had just been acquired by Sun or something or other. And I think Ali had been at Go or at one of those other companies around doing Newton kind of stuff, right? And Ali goes, I can't come, I'm busy doing it, but I know this guy Tony, and he might be interested. So I called Tony up, and Tony was on the ski slope skiing, and Tony's respun the whole story that that he came up with the idea of the iPod, and that Steve called him, and I mean, that's all nonsense.
This is Tony Fidel.
This
you're
is Tony
talking about.
Fidel. Yeah.
Okay.
So I dragged Tony in. I convinced Tony to act as, he didn't want, I wasn't sure we were going to actually do this yet. So I didn't want to hire someone. I wanted a consultant. So I brought him in as a consultant to start the research around, doing the product. And so we assembled a few people around him, some people from the CTO group, Stan from the marketing group, a couple others, and a couple EEs. And they started doing the basic work around, which processor would we use, what middleware would we go get, or where would we get it from, what OS would we use, all that type of stuff. And so, we got to the point where we had selected all the pieces we need. We'd found Portal Player. There was 5 or 6 solutions on the market, or coming to the market. Portal Player had the best one. They had a low-level OS we could modify to do what we need. We found some middleware at another Apple spinoff that was doing middleware for cell phones, and we could leverage what they did. We ended up, we started licensing it up, and we ended up buying it from them. We had all the pieces, and
Sorry, what was the processor you chose?
Portal Player.
The processor?
Portal Player.
Oh, is that a chip?
That is a chip.
Oh,
They
I'm
made
sorry.
processors.
I thought it was software.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
I forget the name of the software company, but they did middleware. I mean, Portal Player had a low-level OS, which we then modified, and then we bought the middleware, and then Stina's team did the GUI on top of it. So, I go, okay, here's a real budget, here's a real schedule. We have the beginnings of an industrial design. Tony, I need you to lead the team. Tony goes, nah, I don't. I'm going to go off and do my own thing. It sounds like, from what I've read since then, he was thinking about going and then at that point doing his own iPod, kind of ripping us off for what development we'd done. But I twisted his arm really hard, and he finally agreed to lead the team. So I put him in as team leader, and we built a cross-functional team. In the beginning, it was 20, 25 people to do the first iPod, and we did it in 11 months. So we really started in. We really got going in February. Could have even been March, all right. And we launched it in, basically the week after I got married. Or we had to postpone the launch for my wedding, all right. And because I had set my wedding date, and Steve goes, okay, we're going to announce this date. And I'm like, no, Steve, I'm getting married then. So a week later we can do it. So we postponed the launch for a week. In October of 2001, I got married October 13th. It was a week or so later. And then we actually started shipping in November for Christmas. Right? And so it was the first product we'd really ever done in less than a year. And we really humped on getting that done. It really stressed all the systems, but it came out great. It was a great product.
Now, did that set a pace for Apple?
Yeah. I mean, I kept turning up the crank, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's my fault if everyone's complains about working too hard at Apple, because every product we do, I would accelerate the next one, right? And so the pace of innovation kept increasing, right? And frankly, I was shit terrified, right? I mean, for the iPod, Sony should have killed us, right? They owned this space, right? They'd sold 300 million Walkman. Right? They owned the content. They had Sony Music, right? So there was no reason why Sony shouldn't have owned this space. So I figured, hey, it's just a matter of time. Sony will wake up, and they're going to kill us because they got great. They were great engineers. It wasn't like we were better. We were very good engineers, but they had very good engineers too, right? And Sony builds great products. As a matter of fact, Steve was always in awe of Sony's products. That was sort of, he sort of used Sony as the, you got to build products like Sony. Right, at least in the early days. Now it's a different. No, they're coming back again. They're coming. The new TVs are pretty good. There was a period of time where it was not so good, right? But the new stuff's pretty good. But they were the company that Steve always held up to go. This is, what we need to surpass.
Now that's a shift in mindset though towards more of a consumer electronics competitor.
Well, so this is interesting because the company at this point in time is about to make a transition from being a computer company to a consumer company, not just in the iPod, but the computers too, right? There were almost no enterprise products.
So tell us about that. That's
well, so Steve hated enterprise. When we did the G5 Tower, I'm like, I can do really great products for the enterprise for content creation. So Steve went, okay, go ahead and take a look at that. So I went to New York. I went to visit a whole bunch of studios. They were doing advertising, movies, all that stuff. They were using, Macs and SGI and Cray computers. I mean, they had it all, right? I mean, there's massive compute, to do video editing and to do content creation and content management and all of that stuff. Massive storage, massive compute, all of that. So, I talked to a bunch of their CIOs, and I created from that, like, the Mac version of what a server and a RAID drive would be. So we created the Xserve and the Xserve RAID, right? And we took the G5 tower.
Those were
great
lovely.
products.
Those were lovely, by the way.
Great products.
Beautifully
Great products.
Beautifully done.
Loved those products,
Yeah.
right? And so they were home run products from a design point of view,
Yes.
and people loved them, right? But Apple was not an enterprise company. Steve didn't like having to talk to customers. And, in the enterprise, they're going to buy 100 Xserves and Xserve RAIDs. They want to talk to the CEO. And I mean, there was one event where there was, 500 CIOs in a room in Vegas or something, and Steve was supposed to fly there and talk to him, and he didn't get on the plane. And he left the poor guy who was in charge of enterprise sales, kind of high and dry, like to go to the dance. So, in any case, great products, really interesting, but Apple was not the company to sell them at the time. Right? It's too bad too, because they were really good. And so that was kind of a detour we took on our product development, roadmap, right? And eventually they shut all that stuff down because it just wasn't our customer base. So we brainstormed a lot about what do we want to be when we grow up, all right? And what kind of company we want to be. And clearly the answer is we wanted to be a consumer company. Still build computers, but build consumer computers, which is why Apple's not really successful in the enterprise, and probably, unless they change something dramatic in their DNA, will never be, all right? Because they can't do the kind of things that are necessary. I mean, basic security stuff, right? I mean, you want to get enterprise class security monitoring on a Mac. You can't do it. I mean, I work at hedge funds. I advise at hedge. I worked at hedge fund for a year. I advise at hedge funds. It's hard to use Macs at hedge funds because you can't monitor all the systems. And in a hedge fund, you need to monitor every computer in the place. So there's lots of software that, military people have left the CIA and NSA and all those places and built up really cool software that monitors a whole network of what's going on and monitors what's going on the computer and all that. And you can't run any of that shit on a Mac because it just doesn't work. Right? So it's coming, but it's not their focus. So and this dates back to history. So. At one point in time, Gateway tried to acquire us. I mean, like when we did that big downturn, I think it was like around 2000. I mean, the shit hit the fan, right? And our sales dropped off a cliff. This was before Thanksgiving. Dropped off a cliff. And everyone else in the PC industry was going, no, everything's fine, it's just Apple, right? Or saying we're all good, and Kodak falls off a cliff, right? And the consumer companies start going over this cliff. And eventually, everyone goes over the cliff, right? And so at that point in time, before Gateway had gone off the cliff, but we had, Gateway came in and tried to acquire us.
And this is 2000 when the .com.
Yeah, during the whole .com
thing
explosion.
is about to plummet.
99, 2000, something like that.
Okay.
Sometime in that time frame. I don't remember exactly when, but it was that Thanksgiving. I remember things went to hell, right? I mean, the world just died, right? And it's interesting because it's in that period of time from then to when the company started going up again. There was, like a year and a half, 2 years. We ran at a loss, which Wall Street hated. Our stock went to shit again. But we invested in R&D unbelievably. So Mac OS 10 got developed, massive development during that time. iPod, a lot of the products. I mean, that was our suite. I mean, we were just cranking during that time period. And we were basically running, Fred was running the company basically at a slight loss, to break even, right in that range. It was very carefully controlled, because we wanted to invest everything we could in R&D. So when the market turned around, we exploded. Right? And that's the beginning of the big, uplift on stuff. So, yeah, it's been, phenomenal since then. So we did a huge investment during that time.
What kind of things were you investing in?
Mac OS 10, iPods,
Okay.
the product lines, all of that
Right.
got invested during that time.
We must talk about the software at some point.
Yeah. So any case, we did the first generation iPod. Walt Mossberg decreed it was too expensive and it would never be successful. It was successful, but it wasn't a rocket ship or anything.
Did you come out with the 1,000 songs in your pocket thing right away?
Yeah.
And do you know who came up with that? Or?
Yes, Steve would say he did.
Okay, but
Right, but probably probably the ad agency.
marketing or ad
It's
agency?
the ad agency.
Okay.
I mean, he worked very closely with the ad agency, and they came up with iMac name, and they did all that stuff. I mean, basically, our marketing department. I mean, Phil, bless his heart, is fabulous, but he was product marketing in those days. Right? He didn't have the other parts of marketing. Steve ran the rest of marketing, right? And so he, direct pipeline in the advertising agency, Marcom, all that stuff came through Steve. Steve did all of that.
So the public perception of the company is
Steve.
controlled by Steve.
It's all Steve. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I mean, look, he did a great job on all of it. I mean, he assembled a group of people around him that
Amazing.
were phenomenal.
Incredible group.
Right, and the advertising they did, and the product naming, and all that stuff was remarkable.
What was your closest competitor at this time? Probably there weren't.
iPod?
There weren't any.
None.
Right?
There was nobody.
Right.
I mean, we caught everybody flat-footed.
Right.
There was nobody, and but the product did well, not great, right? I mean, and I mean, look, it was a small market. It was, I mean, the way when we did iTunes, I mean, initially just did Rip Mix Burn, but we wanted to start selling music for the store. We convinced the music companies, Steve convinced the music companies that this is a great experiment because at most we've got 2% market share. Right? At most we got 2% market share. So you don't have to worry about like 98% of your market. And so it's a great way to experiment. And so they went, okay, right? And frankly, at the time, we were going to stay Mac only, right? We didn't have this idea of we were going to expand to the, to the
Because
PC.
again, it's another thing that makes you unique. That makes the Mac unique.
It makes people buy more Macs, and
Yeah.
that was the whole point of the iPod was to
Right.
sell more Macs. But the lesson from Airport just sort of sat on my shoulders and sat on Phil Schiller's shoulders, and we started hammering Steve. We got to take this stuff to the PC. We got to take it to the PC, and we just kept haranguing him. And finally, he goes, "Fuck you guys! I don't want to talk about this anymore. You do whatever you want." So we went out and we found a software company. I think they were in L.A. I forget what they were called, but we basically hired them to take their software, their PC software, and hook it up to the iPod. Right? And Music Match is what it was called. Right? The original software that was bought to make iTunes was called Sound Jam. Was the original product. And those were a bunch of Apple guys who did that. This was a different group down in LA. They'd done a product that was, sort of a half-assed version of iTunes. It wasn't very good, but it worked on a PC, right? And it worked with portable players. And so we just modified it to work, with the iPod. And then we gave them a very strict roadmap. And we said, look, here's the roadmap we want, right? And this thing's going to put you guys on the map. So here's what we need. And Phil and I managed them very closely. And manage their roadmap and the iPod on the PC. By the way, we also did the Mini at this point in time, all right, and which Steve tried to cancel. But I got a panic phone call one day. You better get to this meeting. Steve just canceled the Mini, and I'm like, ah. So I come running down there, and Steve's just leaving the room, and everyone goes, what do we do? I said, just keep going, right? Because the Mini is really the product that caused the iPod to take off. Because the price point, right? And it was the colors, it was the aluminum, anodized aluminum, the colors, price point. I mean, it had enough storage, but not too much.
Sorry, you're talking about. I got a little confused. The iPod Mini.
iPod Mini,
Not
yeah,
the
yeah.
Mac Mini.
Not the Mac Mini. No, I'm talking about iPod Mini.
Right.
Yeah, that product just really took off, and we
Okay.
brought out the PC stuff about the
Right.
same time. So
Can I just ask, how did whoever it was convince? This thing about it's only 2% of the market doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So how did they convince the music industry to
the thing had taken off. Right?
finally open up?
I mean, the thing
and-
had taken off. Clearly, it was the wave of the future, and Steve just went. And Steve's very persuasive, and he got him. He kind of played them off against each other, right? If they had colluded with each other, which fortunately they hate each other so much that they couldn't, right? And I mean, there's a couple guys who've written books that were on the other side of this, and they hated Steve, just hated Steve. I forget the names of the people, but you can go read about them.
Yeah.
Like the guy at Sony Music or whatever, just hated Steve. But Steve basically played them off against each other, and he got them to drop like dominoes, right? And once you got enough critical mass, you know, the guys were feeling left out. They had to jump in too, and he finally got them all, which
That's
was
true.
amazing.
In
right?
fact,
And that was something that you know,
Yeah.
only Steve could do.
as soon as
something
you
like
get
that.
the first guy, they're probably all gonna, like if you get Universal,
We almost bought Universal.
the people at Sony are gonna.
Steve wanted to buy Universal, and Fred looked at the financials and had a heart attack, but
It's-
Steve still wanted to do it.
It's a
And-
money-losing company, is it?
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Financials were terrible. But Steve wanted their library, which was very smart, but also was a problem, because our point to him was, look, if we buy Universal, everyone else is going to shut us out, and Universal doesn't have all the music we need; they have some of the music, so we're better off not buying it. Now, it would have been a good investment. Financial investment, but it might have screwed up, you know, the iPod ramp. And I think as a company, we were better off not owning the content and having the product really ramp versus the other way around. And so I don't remember the exact timeline, what came first, you know, the music store or the PC, or I think the PC came first, then the music store, I don't remember. But you know, we sort of hit this you know, we just sort of hit this tipping point where between, you know, we had the second generation iPod, we had the iPod Mini, we had the you know, the music store, we were running on PCs with Music Match, and we just had critical mass, and this thing just took off like a rocket. The Mini in particular, but all the iPods, right? And we were turning the crank as fast as we could. Right? I mean, year or less product cycles, because I was terrified that Sony was going to kill us. It was just a matter of time until Sony came out with a better product. Right? I mean, they had a lot longer to work on it because we were on this really fast cycle time.
I remember you saying in a talk somewhere that to be successful, a company has to eat its young.
Right.
And
Exactly.
basically every year you need to kill off the previous.
So we were on like, what's the next technology? What's, you know, what are we driving? I mean, the Mini was an interesting one because we had a company from Colorado. It was a spin out of one of the other disk drive companies. I forget which one. So they come in and they show us a micro drive. Right? I mean, the Toshiba drive's 1.8 inch. You know, this was 1 inch. Okay. You know, kind of like the IBM micro drive. And they showed it to us, and we went, great, we love it. You know, when's it going to be done? Well, it's going to, you know, 9 months to a year. I'm like, okay, we'll take all of it. We want exclusive. They go, well, we don't really want to do exclusive. I'm like, you really want to do exclusive? They go, we don't want to do it. And they're like, it's not going to build the kind of company we want to build. I'm like, you know, that's really dumb. So we went back and forth. And finally I went, okay, you know, that's fine. So by this time, the micro drive, the IBM disk drive group had been sold to Fujitsu. All right? And the guy who used to run it for IBM was still running it for Fujitsu. Or it was, Fujitsu. All right? And they're the big drive manufacturer.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So IBM sold their drive division to Fujitsu. Right. So I called this guy and I said, hey, it's me again. All right? And he goes, whatever it is you want, we'll do it. and so for the Mini, we use the now Fujitsu micro drive.
Okay.
All right.
And they're 1 inch drives?
1 inch drives,
Okay.
yeah. And they had 5 gig by this point in time, and they took a very deep breath, you know, and they sucked up the price.
Were these in a
And-
compact flash format, these discs, or were they in some other connector
No, they
system?
were just, I don't
Okay.
remember.
Because they were also used in cameras,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
They had a different form factor for that, but
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And so we went, you know, hey, you know, how many can you make? And you know, we want all of them, you know, for this, we want exclusive for this space, and they went, no problem. And you know, and that was the Mini. That's what created the Mini, all right? So the thing took off like a rocket, right? And the PC side went crazy, right? Because everyone wanted to you know, and you know, it was a good product, not a great product on the PC, right? So now Steve's finally come around, and he goes, look, if we're going to do this, they have to have an Apple experience, right? And you know, it'll give people a taste of the Mac, so it'll make them want to come to Mac for all the rest of their stuff. So let's take iTunes and really port it to the PC. So Sina took iTunes, ported it to the PC, and we had our first, like, you know, Apple application on top of the PC, right? It took a lot of kicking and screaming to get there, but we got there.
There's also this fact that the iPod itself became kind of a status symbol.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to comment on that a bit? Like,
Well, it was, I mean, you saw it everywhere, right? And you know, I mean, the advertising was fabulous with the earbuds, and I mean, the UK. I remember the UK. There was an article in, you know, one of the rags, UK rags or whatever, and it had, you know, whichever spice it was and the football guy. I don't, you know, I'm not a sports guy, right?
Yes.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
right? David Beckham.
Beckham and Posh Spice
And
or
Posh
something.
Spice, right? And there's a photograph of the two of them walking through Heathrow with their iPod headphones in, right? Our sales in the UK just exploded after that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have better marketing. It was unbelievable. And you know, basically, we just went worldwide with it. And the marketing was great, the word of mouth, the buzz, all of that was great. And people started using iTunes on the Mac, I mean, on the PC, and then they started buying Macs because they realized, oh my God, this is so much of a better experience. So it really helped Mac sales on the consumer side. And it really transitioned Apple from being a computer company to a consumer company. And through all of this, I mean, Apple actually changed its name. Remember, it used to be called Apple Computer. And in the midst of all this, Steve told Nancy, you know, go change the name. It's just going to be Apple. And we became Apple. All right. So you know, but it was the start of the company becoming a consumer company. All right. And you know, it's you know, the rest is kind of history.
It's such an exciting story, even just to hear you talk about it.
Oh, it was so much. I mean, it was so hard.
Because of the impact.
So hard, but it was so much fun, right? And we did multiple products. We just kept turning the crank. We built the iPod team to a bigger and bigger team. We spun it off as a division. I took over so I was running kind of all the product development. I spun out the iPod division. I took over the iPod division. You know, I hired someone else to run the Mac division. So now we're split into, you know, we're starting to divisionalize, right? And you know, eventually Johnny went to work for Steve in all this transition, and I just focused on iPods and iPod follow-ons, right? And so we were cranking out, you know, Micro and Nano, and I mean all those different products. You know, iPod 2, 3, 4. I mean, we cranked out so many products.
As a company, what fraction of revenues was iPod generating for you?
Well, it started off really small, but it got bigger and bigger, right?
And in some ways, it tied the company over in some cases, didn't it?
Yeah, you know, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it became a substantial portion of and clearly the growth was explosive, right? I mean, that was the thing, is the growth was explosive, right? And it set us on the path for the iPhone, right? I mean, there's a couple things that set us on the path for the iPhone. So the guy I hired to run Mac products was a guy named Tim Bucher, and Tim had been with us at Next and had gone off to do a game company, 3DO or something, and he'd gone to a couple other places. And so I hired him to run the Mac thing. He didn't work out. You know, kind of the antibodies kicked in and he got pushed out and stuff. But when he came in, he was very hot on tablets. All right, so we started thinking deeply about tablets, right? And we'd also been thinking about, so we think about, you know, keyboards on tablets and multi-touch, and we were thinking also about multi-touch on the PowerBooks, right? And so
Would this be on a touch screen on the PowerBook? Multi-touch?
No, this was on the
trackpad.
On the trackpad.
Okay.
Multi-touch on
Got
the
it.
trackpad, right? Is where we started thinking, and then we started thinking about a touch screen version, you know, of what would become an iPad. Right, but you know, a Mac or an iPod or whatever, but a big one, you know, that you could read your news on and that you could do email on, and you know, I mean, it wasn't for content creation, but content consumption.
Consumption, right?
Right. So that was the concept, and Tim was driving this hard. Microsoft about that time came out with the first version of, I guess I don't know what it's called then, but now it's the Surface, right? And you know, that was kind of a failure, and you know, I mean, but there was a lot of stuff going on around tablets, and people were thinking about it. So we, you know, so multi-touch, we decided we need to get multi-touch capability, and so we went and bought a company that was a spin-off of CMU. Right. So all this stuff that Steve goes on and on about in his keynotes later on about how we own multi-touch and that we created it all and we've patented it all. It's all nonsense, right? I mean, we have a bunch of patents on it. But we bought this company. We partnered with Broadcom. That, you know, they did the chips for it. You know, I mean, there's a whole blog at Microsoft about the history of multi-touch that's really interesting. So Apple, you know, as much as I'd love to take credit for having created the first idea around multi-touch, that's nonsense. Right? It was a technology that just wasn't capable enough yet, right? But we started playing around with it. The problem with the tablet is you couldn't do it yet. There wasn't enough performance in the processors to drive the displays of that size, right? And so the logical thing to do was, we were kicking around a phone, right? Steve had gotten a memo from somebody, I forget, about becoming an MVNO, right? So becoming our own carrier, basically. And I'd been trying to put wireless, not Wi-Fi, but cellular wireless in the PowerBooks, right? And I was working a deal. It was the first time I met Paul Jacobs from Qualcomm. So I was trying to work a deal between Qualcomm, us, and Verizon. Right? And Paul and I were in. So because this had to be subsidized. This was way, way expensive. Right? And we were in. Qualcomm was willing to subsidize. Apple was willing to subsidize, much like we subsidized Wi-Fi in the early days. And we couldn't get Verizon over the hump. They just wouldn't do it because their service was very expensive for the data. And they just wouldn't do it, which was dumb, I thought. But otherwise, today, every notebook would have cellular built in. All right? But, that just didn't happen. But that's how I met Paul, Jacobs in the beginning of this process, So in any case, we're looking at all of this for the tablet, and it's kind of a no-go because the technology is just not ready yet for a tablet. But we keep iterating, right? And even after I leave, they keep iterating, until the iPad comes out. We're doing iPods one after another, and we're starting to think about that the simple version of the iPod, the software on the iPod is too simple because we're starting to add stuff. So we added video, we added color. We started adding more and more capabilities to the iPod. We switched it from FireWire to USB 2 because now USB 2's out. We're increasing, drive size. We do solid state version. So we're bifurcating or adding lots of variations on the product. I did the shuffle. I'm a runner, so I would run along Embarcadero, and I'd see everyone schlepping these big devices, earphones, and then or these tiny ones, and I see people starting. We started doing the shoulder things, the arm things with armbands with Nike and other companies, so you could run with your iPod. But I mean, it's not a good experience. So I said, look, we got to do a shuffle, so we did that.
And that's the one you just clip on?
Yeah, the little tiny one.
The tiny 1 inch
well, now
square.
you clip on. In the old days, it was a little thing that
Yeah.
you just, you could do anything with it, right? You just stuck it on your belt or whatever. But that was for runners. So we had a whole roadmap of these things.
Would that have existed, by the way, if you weren't a runner?
Might not.
Would someone else have come up with that?
Yeah, might not. Who knows?
It's kind of interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's funny because I don't listen to music when I run, but it's really important.
For a lot of people,
It's
yeah.
really important for a lot of people.
Sure, yeah.
And when we worked with Nike to do training, training stuff, I remember we had them do we had them do the very first sort of podcast, right? That was we put on an iPod for running, and we had Nike do it, and Steve listens to it and he goes, "This guy's terrible. He doesn't know anything about running," and I'm like, "Oh my God," because this was done by Alberto Salazar, who's like one of the gods of running, right? But Steve knew everything, right? He knew better, right? But we did a lot of fun stuff around that. We did the Nike Plus, iPod, and so we built a whole ecosystem around the iPod about the connector. We licensed the connector to third parties so we could build this multi-billion-dollar iPod ecosystem. I mean, there were really sort of three legs of the iPod stool, right? I mean, there was the iPod itself. There was the iTunes music store and the music you'd buy, and then there was the peripherals you'd buy. And those three kind of locked you into the iPod family, right, for indefinitely, right? Because once you had those, it was really hard to switch. And that was the idea, right, is we wanted you to just keep buying the next generation iPod. And we'd keep cranking them out, and you'd keep buying more. And, iPods kept growing and growing. The numbers kept growing and growing and growing, and it was great. We started looking at doing more advanced iPods. The iPod operating system wasn't going to work. the Portal Player guys were starting to get itchy about, that they wanted to add other customers because we were their only customers. So we were squeezing them, really hard. So they wanted to expand. They got a new CEO. They were a public company. They went public, and so.
Probably based on the success.
No, it was all based.
Because of you.
It was all based on us.
On Apple.
It was the same thing with Synaptics, right?
Right.
The touch guys, right? They were the same thing. Our business was huge, and they got difficult to work with. So, any case, Portal Player, tried to do a power move, and I said screw that, and so we went to Samsung, and we worked out a deal with Samsung where they were going to do multi-year, multi-family processors for us, basically to our specifications, right? And they went and did that, and we got rid of Portal Player. They crashed and burned. Jensen at NVIDIA bought them. Jensen, CEO, chairman of NVIDIA. In the small world department, the first chip I did with Lsi Logic, I had a world-class apps engineer from Lsi Logic. And we did these amazing chips together. It was the first time they'd done anything of this density. We were using all new tools and everything. And my apps engineer was Jensen Wang. And Jensen and I started a long-term, very close friendship from, on that day forward. And in any case, so Jensen bought Portal Player, and it didn't go anywhere. We did this deal with Samsung. They built processors. And I think they built all the processors for Apple until Apple started using their own, basically.
And those are the ones they got from Pacific Semi?
Yeah, they bought PA Semi and Palo Alto Semi.
I should say.
I don't think they got the chips, but they got the core design and they developed on top of it. But for many years, we used a Samsung roadmap, and multi-year roadmap and stuff. And so, we cranked out iPods. We were busy working on the next generation stuff. Clearly, the software evolved past. It was getting too sophisticated to do. What we had was basically a small operating system that wasn't up to capacity. So we looked at two approaches. Interestingly enough, Steve Sackerman was back at Apple at this point in time. He'd been on the Mac OS X team. He came over and joined us on the iPod team, and he started looking at basically we take the Linux, the mobile Linux, OS at the bottom, and we'd stick some middle layer stuff from Mac OS X. And build apps on top of that, and that was kind of what our concept. And the OS and the Mac OS X guys wanted to use Mac OS X all the way up and down the stack, and so I started this development, we got partway into it. We got some demos and stuff, and we started looking at phone stuff, doing phone because this was for phones and tablets and things like that going forward, and we started playing with phones, and we decided to do the iPhone. Tony was running the project. I helped him choose, the suppliers, build up the team. We picked Infineon, which is now Intel, now getting sold to Apple, right? So it's kind of funny. I negotiated the deal with Qualcomm, the IP licenses and stuff like that. And we did, I did all the sort of founding work around the iPhone. And then I kind of got tired.
Can I ask why Apple decided to build an iPhone? Is it continuation of that strategy?
Yeah, I think it was a continuation of that strategy. It was the logical thing that came next. There was no point in doing personal organizers because those are going to get subsumed by the phone. The phone was going to probably subsume the music player. You couldn't build an iPad yet because the processing power wasn't there, but you could build an iPhone, right? Because the screen's smaller. So you need a lot less processing power, right? And because moving those bits around is a really big deal, we'd been looking at doing this MVNO thing, and that really didn't make sense, and so Steve just we tried this deal with Motorola on doing the music player on top of the Motorola cellular phone. That was a disaster because their product was crap.
Is it the Rocker?
Yeah, the Rocker.
Right.
It was a terrible product.
Yeah. Oh, was it?
Motorola kind of go. Motorola people kind of go, well, Apple screwed us because they were really working on the iPhone and they just did this to learn from us or whatever. That's nonsense. If that product had been great, things might have come out different. But the product was shit. Right? And so we thought about, we thought about home phones, we thought about mobile phones, we thought about Wi-Fi phones, and we thought about a lot of different things, and decided to do the iPhone, right? And around that time, I decided that I needed a break, and so I told Steve I wanted to take a leave of absence, and we agreed to that I wasn't in a hurry, so we agreed to 18 months. I would take my leave of absence, and I had to finish the iPod, the solid state iPod, the Nano, the video, a bunch of products, and keep working on the foundations for the iPhone, and help out with whatever they need to do for the tablet, and all of that, and keep all that stuff moving forward, and then help train Tony to take over the iPod division, and
Was there a thought of that strategy explicitly suggests that the iPhone sort of connects to the Mac in some way, but in a way it's also standalone. Wouldn't you say, like the iPhone?
Well, it started off as being a peripheral to Steve and I used to always fight about iTunes being the sort of center of the Mac connection to peripherals. I'm like, that makes no sense. We should have an application that talks to all these devices, and then you have a bunch of content applications that manage the content, stores, whatever, and you interface to them that way. And Steve, no, we're not going to do it that way. I'm like, all right. So, and then years later, that's kind of how it.
Well, that's what I was getting at.
That's how it ended.
The App Store is that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, but it used to be part of iTunes, right? So it took a long time for them to separate it out. Look, we did the software auto update. That was originally done for USB, right? We used to have a server under Mike Bell's desk, right? That had all the, because Mike Bell was doing the boot ROM stuff, so and drivers and things.
How many millions of users did that have to
a
survive?
lot, right? But the thing with the way we designed USB is you plug in a device.
Yeah.
The biggest problem on PCs is where the hell is the driver? So we you plug in the device, it goes and looks, does it have the driver already in the OS? If no, because we know what device it is because it's a device code comes back over USB. If not, we go to Apple's server, we'd find the right driver, we'd install it. And then all of a sudden, your printer, your whatever would start working, right? And that software evolved into what is now software update on the Mac for all the software, right? But it started off being USB device drivers, right? Which was a huge service headache.
Yes.
A huge service headache because people would never install the driver first.
And very bad user experience too.
Was yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
So
any case, we had a lot of irons in the fire going, and so any case, so Avi and Scott Forstall and the team really wanted to use Mac OS 10. I wanted to use Linux because I could get drivers from everybody, because everyone was using Linux. All the chip guys were using Linux, so I could build a low-level operating system and then support all the Mac OS stuff on top of that. But we'd have a real-time multitasking, low-level operating system running underneath that everybody supported, every chip guy supported. And so Sackerman was working on that. It wasn't going to get traction. That was clear because Steve, really wanted what Scott said, we'll get it done, don't worry. I'm like, okay. And so Sackerman quit and moved to Northern California, where he still is today, hiding out. I took my leave, which turned into, about 6 months before I was supposed. I gave him 18 months notice. 6 months before I was going to leave, Steve and I, it was time to announce to Wall Street because we had to tell Wall Street I was leaving, and make filings and all that kind of stuff. So about 6 months before, Steve and I sat down, had a heart to heart. He goes, you should just go, and maybe you'll come back someday. Who knows, and we'll see. And I'm like, okay, whatever you want. But I think he was trying to call my bluff to see if I'd go, no, I really want to stay at Apple. And I went, all right, whatever. And so we announced 6 months before I left. I spent 6 months, doing the handoff. We got a lot of the iPhone stuff going, hardcore before that. And a lot of other things got put in the pipeline during that time period, and we kept shipping lots more iPods, and I left. That was kind of the end of an era for me. Right?
Yes.
I was there 9 years.
Wow.
I am incredibly proud of what we accomplished, not just from a product point of view, because we created an incredible stream of successful products. If I look back, I think the only product we did that wasn't successful was the Cube.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That was the only one, which is an amazing track record given the number of products we did. Right? And I would argue the Cube was successful in a lot of ways. It just was not a commercial success. Because we learned how to do clear plastics, we learned how to do cooling with no fans, there was like so many things we learned from the Cube, and all that learning went into the future products. Right? And you wouldn't have, a fanless iMac if, you hadn't done that. And you wouldn't have had clear plastics on a variety of products if you hadn't done that. And I mean, there was so many things that we got out of that. So commercial failure, successful product. Next question would be, well, why did the Cube fail? I would argue that Steve and I were loggerheads over the target for the product. I started it off as a pro product. So the observation was that people bought towers, but never put any cards in them. Right? So they were buying a huge power supply, they were buying all these slots, and they were going for high performance, but not actually using any of the slots. I mean, they had a graphics card because we put a graphics card in, but none of the other slots were used. So I'm like, well, why do that? Why not sell them a small product that had the performance capability, right, and that had an expansion chassis that if you wanted to add cards, the small percentage of people that did could plug in cards in the expansion chassis, but your graphics and your core compute and all of that would be in your main product. And so Johnny and his team came up with the Cube format. Mechanical team went to work on cooling it, right? Because it's a chimney. It was a chimney design, so it sucked air in from underneath. The heat sinks were in the middle of the product instead of on the outside. They came through a core chimney. The heat accelerated through it, and it would cool the product that way. We had touch switch on it. We had a lot of really cool stuff, right? And we developed this very high-end serial bus that was sort of firewire, super firewire, that would connect it to another box which we never got to develop, that would have been, the companion chassis for storage and all that stuff, which is its own power supply and everything else. So the main Cube had just what you needed. You could do a high-end or low-end version of it, and high-end or low-end graphics, and it was a standalone product, and then you could plug in this expansion chassis. That was the concept, and that's what we went to go design. We got partway into it, Steve goes, no, this is a consumer product. I'm like, Steve, it's too expensive to be a consumer product, right? And so we went back and forth, but it ended up being a consumer product that was too expensive, and so crashed and burned. But
very beautiful.
Beautiful. It's in the Museum of Modern Art.
I was just going to say, yeah.
No. It's Johnny and his guys did a fabulous job on it, and the mechanical engineering team did amazing work. The electrical team. It's a work of art in every dimension.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, the serial expansion chassis thing, which now is used by lots of people doing, there's been lots of standards since then that have come up since then that people use, but it was a really good idea, and I think it would have been a very successful high-end product. I think, but we learned a lot from it.
Yes.
And so that made it worth all the effort. And I think that pretty amazing. I mean, I was there 9 years. Pretty amazing track run.
I think there's a saying in Latin on the passing of an emperor, and it goes, if you seek a monument to them, look around you. That fits you.
Well, I don't know.
It does, John. It really does.
It's
You've touched almost every person on Earth's life.
Yeah, I have.
With your
from
technology.
That perspective, I have.
That's
but
pretty unusual.
But it's it wasn't the motivation. The motivation was always build great stuff for people, right? And save Apple. I mean, that was the other part of it, right? I mean, Apple was dying when we got there, and it was save Apple, and build great products. And we didn't need to do market studies or anything like that. We knew what the next product was. It was self-evident, and the technology was evolving so quickly. And we had a great technology, a variety of technology teams, so we knew what to incorporate next. I mean, we missed CD burning, and I feel stupid about that, right? I mean, we knew it was coming, but we didn't know how fast it was going to come. So that was the only technology we missed along the way. Everything else, we were there, like right at the front of it. We always picked the right set of technologies. This is something I spent an enormous amount of time on. was focusing on what technologies to choose going forward and making sure we had the right mix at the right time, because it's all about that convergence of technologies and balance to your system architecture, right? Because the system expands into the ecosystem, right? It's not just about the single product anymore, but it's about the entire ecosystem. So, if you had an iTunes store and it took an hour to download a song, useless, right? So it all has to kind of work together. So I think we did a remarkable job. We revamped all the processes by how Apple did products. We redid the whole team, right? We bought companies, we hired people, and they're basically the guys driving the company now. It was a great run. People ask me, am I sorry I left? Well, look, I miss the team. I miss some of the stuff we did, but I was exhausted. I mean, I worked for Steve on and off for 16 years. And that was, that was shattering. And I just needed a break. So
I'm sure those were basically 80 to 100-hour weeks for.
Oh yeah. Christmas Eve
for 20 years.
So Christmas, Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day, Steve and I are busy yelling at each other on the phone. Our wives are standing on either side, like tapping their feet, going, hey, it's time to get going to, Christmas dinner, right? And Steve and I are busy yelling at each other. I mean, this was constant. We would, and we had this love-hate thing going. I love Steve, right? And I hated Steve. And Steve loved me and hated me, right? Because I made his life difficult, right? Because I didn't always do what I was told, and he liked people who did what they were told. But we did amazing work together. Amazing work, and I'm very proud of what we accomplished together. And in some ways I'm a little sorry about how things ended up, because Steve got mad at me when I went to Palm. We'll get into that some more, but a lot of people got sick at Apple
From
right?
burnout.
And they just it's an interesting, because I never really thought about it. And when Yukari Kane, who was the Wall Street Journal reporter, was writing that book that turned out about Tim Cook. It wasn't supposed to be. The book was supposed to be about the Apple turnaround. So I spent a huge amount of time with Yukari talking, and she's got great material, by the way. But I spent a ton of time talking with her about it, because she was writing this other book, and then the publisher made her switch to writing the Tim Cook book, which I don't think was very good. It was right, but it was wrong. It was right, but 10 years ahead of its time. So it was wrong. But Yukari said to me, she goes, it's really weird how many people at Apple got sick and in some cases died. It wasn't just Steve, Mike Colbert. The list goes on and on of people who got, terminally ill or really ill or, and I wasn't feeling good. It wasn't like I wasn't sick, but I was just tired, and I wasn't feeling it, and I worried that if I stayed, I'd end up damaging myself, and my health was frankly more important, right? And if I look at the team now, those guys are all gray and fat, right? And I didn't want to end up gray and fat, and I didn't want to get burned out, there's long histories of, Steve burning people out and, them doing weird things afterwards, and I won't go into any of that, but you guys know all the stories about some of the things that happened in the history of all this. So I didn't want to end up like that. I wanted it to have been a really positive experience, and I learned a lot. I did really well from a personal point of view. I built a great team. I loved the people who were there, and it was just time to take a break. It was April 1 of 2006. Avi left on the same day. That was a fluke, by the way. Fred had left 6 months before, something like that. I left on really good terms with. He was annoyed, but left on pretty good terms with Steve. I think I left the company in pretty good hands. We'd gotten a group of people to really step up to run the both the Mac division and the iPod division, and I felt pretty good about it. And it was kind of time for the next generation, and I was going to go take a break. I had bought a piece of property down in Mexico a couple years earlier on the beach, and decided to build a house. And so I was excited about doing that. And we'd started construction already, but I wanted to go down there and sort of supervise the main part of the construction. And so my wife and I packed up and She had fortunately sold her company shortly prior to that, to one of the private equity guys, and so she got freed up. So we packed up and moved to a one-bedroom apartment in a fishing village on the coast of Mexico, which was pretty fun. Me and my wife and 2 Labradors, and this tiny little apartment. And I spent the next year finishing up a sort of 2.5-year construction project, and finished the house, and we moved in. It was great, and I had very little to do with technology that year. I sort of checked out. Just decided, I just wanted to take a breather, focus on the house, and focus on running and biking and doing other stuff. And but during the week I'd go to the office every day. I'd go over to the construction site and watch some build stuff. And we did a bunch of traveling, and it was great. So it was a great year. We finished the house, and just about the time the house was done, I'm literally laying in my hammock, in front of the house on the ocean, and the cell phone rings, and it's Fred Anderson. And Fred goes, we got this deal we're working on. We want you to help. I'm like, Fred, I'm busy. He goes, no, let me get Roger on the phone. So Fred, Fred Anderson had left Apple. He hooked up with Roger McNamee, with Bono, and started the Elevation Partners. And so Roger and Fred start doing the arm twist of we just need you to come and look at the deal. All right, so come on up and take a look at the deal. So I said, okay, I'll come up and take a look at the deal. So I came up, and it was Palm, and Palm, had been a great company in its heyday, and it had gone through several cycles of success and failure, and it was kind of on the downside. It was a lot like Apple when I joined Apple, except much smaller, right? And it didn't quite have the loyal customer base, but it had it had built some great products and had a lot of loyalty and had a good brand name, and and the products just weren't good enough. And so their concept was to do either take it private or do recapitalization, and they asked me to be the executive chairman and kind of drive the next generation product development. And Ed Colligan was the CEO, and he would stay on as CEO, and he'd run day to day. I'd only have to work half time, and I could stay in Mexico part of the time, so they kind of twisted my arm and talked me into it. And look, I owe Fred an enormous debt of gratitude, because Fred, was so instrumental in saving Apple. Without Fred, Apple, we would never have had the chance to build all those great products. And Roger's great. He's kind of wacky, but he's great. All right, and so I went yes. So we kind of worked out a deal, and the deal was, I was half-time. I'd be executive chairman. I'd drive future product development. I would not have to be the CEO. If we sold the company, I wouldn't have to go with it. And there was a few other items, none of which worked out. So I come up from Mexico, and actually Ed comes down and spends a couple of days with me in Mexico, and we kind of talk about the company, about him, and about me, and we kind of work things out, how to work together, and then I came up, and I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I drove down I took the train down the first day, and I get to the train station, and the Palm shuttle bus isn't there. And I'm like, this is not good. We're off to a terrible start, right? If the shuttle bus driver can't get here, I can't imagine how screwed up the rest of the company is. And it was pretty screwed up. So I basically started working full time, and trying to sort it all out. We killed some of the we followed a very similar recipe. We fired a bunch of people. We killed some of the products they were working on. We invested more heavily in others, and then we set our sights on a long-term plan of a whole new OS. And they'd been sort of dabbling in it, but they hadn't really, put a stake in the ground as this is what we're going to go do. So We started working on the Palm Pre and WebOS, and WebOS was sort of the really big effort.
Was there anyone who had on WebOS team that had a lot of experience developing a mobile operating system?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We had a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we had a bunch of guys.
Could you say where they came from? Or?
Apple.
Oh, okay.
Right. Some of the guys from the Mac OS, the old Mac team, right? I mean, pre Mac OS 10, whatever the, I forget what it was all called, but the old classic Mac. OS 9, and then also Mac was working on a new next generation operating system they never shipped, that failed, that they never got out the door. In any case, yeah, we had people who'd worked on that. We had people from some other places, and then we brought lots of other people in. We hired some really great people, and then there were some great people there, and we let go of some people, right? So we kind of mixed it up. So the day before the public announcement that we're going to do this, that Elevation is going to recapitalize the company, that I'm going to take over as executive chairman, I call Steve. I sent Steve an email. I said, hey, Steve, it's going to be an announcement. Just want to let you know, give you a heads up. I can't give you the details, but, it involves me and Palm. And like 2 nanoseconds later, I get an email back from him going, I hope you're not doing anything to compete with Apple. And so, we got on the phone, and I'm like, dude, I want to work together, right? I mean, they had just sort of launched the iPhone, and I'm like, look, we can build an ecosystem around all this, and there's a lot of stuff we can do. And I got not interested, and not interested in talking to you, and don't hire any of our people. So, of course, we were hiring people from Apple, and we're hiring people from elsewhere too. I didn't want to build just an Apple culture. I wanted to build a mixed culture, but we hired some Apple people. We hired some people from other places, and then Steve got really mad and threatened to sue us and sent us a nasty letter, and we sent him a letter back, and he responded to that letter, and the letter he responded with was kind of the key letter they used in the no poaching. There was this government investigation about no poaching and collusion between the CEOs about no poaching and everything, and so that was one of the key pieces of evidence in it, and so it was a big mess. But so Steve got mad at me to stop talking to me for a while, I mean, we assembled a team. We set out to build WebOS. We had a very clear picture about what we wanted to do. That we wanted to base it on WebKit, and that it was web native. That long term the OS could reside on the device, in the cloud, whatever, right? And that it basically had a bus in it that was flexible, and you could run it in any portion anywhere. That it automatically software updated. It was multitasking. It had a user interface that was basically it looks like OS 10. Right, and if you look at OS 10 today, I mean that looks just like all the notifications that you see in Android and iPhone now, all came from that. Of course, it's the same people, because when we shut down Palm, they all left and went to basically. But we did a lot of really profound work. Matthias Duarte was our user interface guy. He's phenomenal. He's now at Android doing all the Android stuff. But we hired him from I think he was at Danger at the time. We hired him to come in. We had some ID guys, from Apple, from other places. We had a really good ID team. We assembled a really world-class team, and we made a couple mistakes. So they'd been working on sort of a companion, a tablet companion to a cell phone. So instead of it being an iPad that was sort of standalone, you had to have it work with your phone, which kind of made no sense. And so, it got announced before we got there, but then we kind of killed it. And we were doing stuff with Microsoft, and I'm like, we should kill this stuff with Microsoft and just focus. And they're like, no, we're going to get revenue from it. So that'll help tide us over to when we ship WebOS in a couple of years. Because it's going to take us it's going to take, a typical operating system effort takes 3 or 4 years. We did the first generation in like less than 2, or a little over 2 maybe. But it was like really fast track. And, it's revenue to tide us over, and I'm like, okay, whatever. Right. Well, that was a big mistake. That was the first mistake I made, is we should have killed the Windows product immediately, because our product was so much better than anyone else's for a variety of reasons. And nobody cared. Samsung's was $5 cheaper, so they sold Samsung's. right? You know, we did the same stuff we did with loading drivers. I mean, the big issue with Windows Mobile or Windows phones was people had to load the driver first. You know, you plugged in USB, it just automatically loaded the driver, and you know, off you'd go, right? And we had to get in a big fight with Microsoft because, interestingly, the only way Microsoft could get people to sign the legal agreement of you know, their licensing terms was by opening the CD you needed to use to put the driver in. Right, and, you know, but that screwed up your packaging because you had to have a CD-sized package, right? You had to have, I mean, you had to load the CD before you plugged your phone into your computer. I mean, none of it made any sense.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went, we're not doing any of that. And you know, they got mad, but they got over it, and we changed how that's all done. And now that's how Windows does everything too. I mean, you know, Windows Mobile does everything too. But you know, I think we did a lot of really advanced stuff in WebOS. You know, I mean, the fact that so much of your stuff was in the cloud, and you could switch devices and it would automatically update the new device to match the old device. And our hardware wasn't good enough, right? And we were, you know, it took us a long time to build the machine at Apple, right? Because you know, we did some of the hardware, but Asia, the guys in Asia did a lot of the you know, a lot of the hardware. You know, we had you know, Compal, Barrier Compal, we had Uncle Terry at Foxconn, we had, that's Terry Go. You know, we had you know, half a dozen companies we worked closely with, and we built the relationship over time, and we built the engineering teams so that their side could work with our side and really understood, you know, what it was about building great products. I mean, if you look today, probably the best PC notebooks are from ASUS, right? And that's because ASUS had bought a company called AlphaTop. Right? I mean, they got handed off a few times, but they all ended up at ASUS eventually. And that company is the one that did some of the iBooks with us in the early days. And that same engineering team took that DNA and instilled it into the rest of their notebook team. So, you know, any case, it takes a while to build up that kind of relationship, the symbiotic relationship that it takes to build great products. And Palm didn't have that. Right? And so we need to rebuild that, and we didn't have the time, right? But you know, but I think we built a great OS, right? And we built good hardware products, not great hardware products. I did my fault. I did a shitty job with the carriers, all right? So Ed did a deal with Sprint, couldn't get a deal done with Verizon. You can't be successful with just Sprint. Once we announced on Sprint, you know, Verizon wanted to do a deal. We did a deal with Verizon, then Verizon screwed us. AT&T was kind of in the mix around all of this. I mean, it was a mess, right? And the carriers, you know, they're just difficult to work with. And, you know, Motorola Handset Group, which got spun out, Sanjay Jha took that over. So Sanjay was a Qualcomm. We opened Kimono because we worked very closely with Qualcomm. I mean, all of our products were based on Qualcomm processors, and we worked very closely. And Sanjay was running all that stuff, and so we opened Kimono and everything to Sanjay. And then a week later, you know, about WebOS and everything we're doing, about our launch and all that. And then like a week later, he ends up being CEO of Motorola Mobility. But one thing he did a better job on was he parked himself at Verizon, and he got that Verizon Google, you know, Android deal done with the Droid thing, and we couldn't get that done. And I should have just, you know, I spent my time focused on the product development. He didn't have to do that because you know, Google was doing all that for him. Although they copied a bunch of things we did for, you know, the Motorola specific things, but you know, so I don't know. I mean, it was a trade-off, right? And Android, if we'd been 6 months earlier, we would have gotten what became the Droid deal. And we would have basically been like the Verizon product for that season, which would have made, you know, entire. So we were basically 6 months late, and it's because we got started 6 months too late. I mean, we did an incredible job of developing a whole new OS from scratch, which, by the way, had a lot of similarities to stuff I was trying to do at Apple. I mean, this was a Linux base, right? And then we built the middleware. We used WebKit and all that for all the UI stuff. Right, and we used a lot of open source pieces and pulled it all together. You know, so you know, it was a great OS. It was a great OS, and we never really had time to finish it. We never really had time to ship enough products to really get it. I mean, we shipped millions of products, but that wasn't enough to.
Where were they assembled?
In China, yeah, China, in Shenzhen and north of Shanghai. Yeah, we started with Inventec Appliance. Some of the same guys who did like one of the first iPods, right? I mean, so. It's sort of round up the usual suspects because there's a handful of people that are capable of building these kind of products, and it's Foxconn and it's Quanta and Compal and Inventec and a handful of others, right? So we were building the kind of the design relationship we needed, but we couldn't get there in time, and we never really got a chance to get going, and a couple of things happened in the industry that just really hurt us from a timing point of view. The Android Droid thing, Motorola Android thing with Verizon really hurt us. The economy went south, and so Europe deals were not to be had. So we just never got a chance to really finish. So we just we had plenty of money. So we raised a lot of money on Wall Street. And so that money wasn't an issue. We had $500 million in the bank. Yeah, no, we had probably 18 months to 2 year runway. So we could have kept going for another 18 months and 2 years. My worry was what happened after the 18 months, that we wouldn't make it through, and that we'd come out the other side with nothing. And we knew that Google, Motorola, Apple, they were all going to invest huge amounts of money. Billions of dollars in this, and as a start, we knew that RIM was going to die, BlackBerry, whatever, right? They were going to die. We knew that. We knew Nokia was toast, and if those guys are toast, and they were industry darlings, right? We had a real uphill battle.
What made you think they were declining? Just news reports?
The products were crappy. No. Their products were crap, right? The iPhone was going to kill them, right? When Android and us got to the level of where we had really reliable products, we were going to kill them, right? And there was no way they were going to catch up because they didn't get it, right? They didn't get it. So we built great products. We had a great team. The realization hit that we just didn't have the horsepower as because of our size, and Verizon did a deal that they didn't live up to and stuck us with a huge amount of inventory, and $100 million worth of inventory or something. It was horrible, and there's ways to dump all that, various places in the world and stuff. You can go dump it all, but it really put a hurt to us. So we decided it was time to sell the company, and so I went out and we hired some bankers. We hired Goldman Sachs, Nick Giovanni, who's great, and we hired Frank Quattrone. He had just sort of gotten back in the business, having gotten his legal troubles over with Jim Comey, and those two guys helped me sell the company. And I sort of round up the usual suspects, talked to HP, talked to BlackBerry RIM. Talked to Apple, Steve and I talked about it because he really wanted the IP, because he didn't want anyone else to get the IP. And we had a lot of really good IP, both on the WebOS side and on the original Palm side. We had a lot of really good IP.
What would have kept Apple from buying you?
Nothing, except that he wanted the IP, he didn't want the whole company. Right, so he's like, well, give us a non-exclusive license to the IP and sell the company to someone else. I'm like, well, that values our IP at zero, basically. So that's a non-starter. But we talked about a bunch about it, over time. And there's a couple other companies we talked to, and in the end, it came down to RIM and HP. HP wanted us less so for the phones and more to build a tablet because they saw the iPad as really hurting them. And so they wanted us to now we built WebOS to be scalable, so it could go from anything from a tiny phone to a TV set. We'd already kind of done it, and definitely to a tablet. It wasn't product ready, but the concept right?
The
And the
architecture.
architecture was scalable.
Right.
It was all scalable. So HP wanted to build a tablet, and frankly, RIM needed a new OS, and they were sort of crashing around with. They bought some other OS, and they were trying to incorporate that, and it was terrible. So we kind of got down to the end. It was those two guys. HTC wanted to buy us. We had a bunch of people thinking about buying us, and it came down to RIM and HP. And actually, I wanted to sell it to RIM. I thought the RIM guys with WebOS could do something spectacular. They needed a new OS. We needed high volume hardware. We needed deep pockets. They hadn't sort of failed yet. They had deep pockets, and I thought there was a really interesting opportunity for the two companies. and then at the last minute, Jim kind of got squirrely. He was, the co-CEOs. It was Jim and Mike was a technology guy, and we kind of we got along okay, and they understood the technology, and they understood the value, and they understood the IP, and they liked how our stuff looked. Right, and how WebOS looked and how you interacted with it and stuff. So they got all of that, and so I thought we were going to have a deal. And then at the last minute, they tried to change the terms of the deal. And I'm like, guys, I got HP, right behind you, and their deal is a clean deal. The board's going to make me take the other deal if you don't not do this. And they went, no, this is our deal. And I'm like, all right. We were this close to announcing a deal with RIM. We were a day away. Right. I was in Florida for their developer conference, right, in Orlando, wherever the hell it was. I was there for their, I was about to announce it, and it kind of blew up at the last minute, which taught me a lesson about the deals aren't done until they're signed, right? And I flew back, and it took us another day to get the deal done with HP, and then we announced that a day later, right? So we basically did the deal with Mark Hurd, who was the CEO, and Todd Bradley, who ran the PC division, and I had a long conversation with Mark about the resources. This was a multi-billion-dollar investment, and this really required relationships with carriers, and that it was really going to be tough, and that Apple and Google and these other companies are investing massive amounts of money, and that HP is going to have to invest that, and and he assured me that he had downsized the company and taken a lot of the innovation out of it to get the financials right, and now the financials were good, and the company was growing again, and he wanted to really invest in innovation, and they needed a tablet, they needed phones, they needed all this stuff, and they were willing to, that he thought that they could make the deals with the carriers, and that we could do a great tablet, and it all sounded really good, right? And thank God we closed the deal, because a month later he got fired. Right.
Mark Hurd.
Mark Hurd,
Oh,
yeah. And so Todd and I took it and tried to do the best we could, and we went and did the tablet. But HP's PC sales were cratering, and so they wanted the tablet to kind of fill in, and there was no way that And we went through a couple of CEOs, and Leo Apotheker was the CEO, the last CEO, and he's like, you got to ship right away, and we're like, we're not ready to ship. And I said, look, we'll ship, but here's the downsides of shipping because we're not really ready. RIM basically copied our UI on the tablet they brought out. I got a chance to see it backstage at one of the All Things D mobile conferences or whatever, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, Mike, this looks just like WebOS. What'd you guys do? He just turned his head and walked away. That never made it anywhere. That crashed and burned. Tough business, right? So we had the WebOS team working overtime to, with the HP hardware team, and we kind of commingled the teams, their mobile team and our team, and became the Palm division of HP, and the touchpad was a great product. It was just sort of a generation. Well, it was kind of half a generation behind, and it was too expensive. And when HP decided to get out of the business, without my knowing about it, they dropped the price on it, and that thing took off like a rocket. So at the right price point, there was clearly a really good market for it. And my point to them was, look, you're going to have to invest a couple billion to subsidize, this marketplace to get into it because you're not in it. So, drop the price, invest in it. Let's get another year or two under our belt of WebOS to where it's mature because, we're a couple years behind. We're running kind of neck and neck with Android, which wasn't that great at the time. But we're a couple years behind Apple. Give us a year or two to catch up with the maturity. We'll mature. We'll have a couple more generations of hardware, which were all in the pipeline. Right? And we just need some time. So get the right price point. Give us time to do it. And a couple things happened. Google bought Motorola Mobility. So they went, we bet $10 billion, right? Apple goes, we bet $10 billion. And Leo and the board were busy buying autonomy. And they didn't have $10 billion. Their chip pile had gone over here.
They spent $11 billion on autonomy,
which was crazy. Which was, I mean, well, that company was built on accounting.
Yes.
Accounting shenanigans.
They're still dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah. Well, and I had this conversation with Ray Lane. I mean, I'm like, because I got it from a hedge fund guy, who said, you got to look at their financials, and they're using the difference in accounting rules in the U.S. and the U.K. to kind of boost, how the company looks. So, but whatever. Look, I'm not an accountant. Supposedly, those guys knew what they were doing, so they bought autonomy. They didn't have $10 billion to invest, and frankly, they didn't want to, because they thought of themselves as an enterprise company. Mark understood he needed to be a consumer company. After Mark was gone, everyone wanted to be enterprise. So, of course, if you ask them about it, they probably went, Rubinstein screwed it all up, and so we shut it down. But that's not my perspective. So, I think we had a pretty good shot. We sold several million, touchpads, right? I mean, we had a reasonable installed base of WebOS for a short period of time, right? And they were good products. They just weren't done. Yeah. Nothing was finished. We never got a chance to finish it.
Absolutely think, just my own opinion, that there would have been a market beneath the premium Apple priced products and everyone else, maybe the Android, people who want something in between.
Yeah, and that's where we were going for. That's exactly what we're going for. Right. And we just never got a chance to get there. Right? And it's too bad because a lot of people worked really hard and we created good stuff. And
the technology
was phenomenal.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And we had a great relationship with Qualcomm. So we were using the latest and greatest Qualcomm chips. Paul and I continued developing our relationship at that point in time, and we had a really good relationship, and we got a great deal from those guys. They really helped us, and they invested, they didn't invest money in us, but they invested a lot of time and effort, and they did invest money because they gave us the chips for a good price, and they were really helpful. We had great relationships with our manufacturers. Uncle Terry was great. And
by the way, after HP took you over, did the manufacturing stay with the same outfits it was at?
Yeah, it's the same guys.
Everything's same.
It changed because I no longer, managed the manufacturing. That went over to the HP guys. But we didn't change factories.
The same factories.
It's the same factories,
yeah.
Right? It's just the management structure changed, right? And I was told I wasn't allowed to talk to the guys in Asia anymore, which I thought was stupid. But they had chain of command, and they didn't want me interfering in the chain of command, even though I had a many year relationship with all these guys, having been at Apple for 9 years, and Palm at 4 years, right? So and I'd been through with all these guys through their own development. Foxconn was a connector company when we started working with them, right? I mean, they couldn't build. They did enclosures and connectors. They couldn't build a laptop, right? We worked through all that with them. We worked on building computers. We did the migration from Taiwan to China with them. Not just them, but with all the guys. Compal and Quanta and Inventec, all those guys. So, but yeah, it's sort of round up the usual suspects, right? But they were all very supportive and yeah, so really good products, just ran out of time. It's too bad, because they were really good. They were really good.
Who made the decision ultimately at HP? Was it Leo?
I have no idea.
Oh.
I didn't know.
Really?
They didn't ask me. I read about it in the press. So
that's pretty...
Right. And then Leo gets fired.
Yeah.
Because he took the fall for the autonomy deal.
Right.
Right. So, it was, so I stuck around for a bit. Todd wanted me to, I'm like, Todd, I'm gonna go. No, we're gonna keep going.
Sorry, who's Todd?
Todd Bradley, who ran the PC division.
Okay.
So I was working for Todd. So Todd's like, stick around. And so then I tried to help them with PCs for a while, just sort of technology and PCs and building better PCs and helping them with sort of product, what makes great products.
Mm-hmm.
And we built a couple good PC products. I can't use PCs personally. I tried. I mean, we got acquired by HP. I'm like, okay, I should really be using a PC, not a Mac, right? I mean, it's just only right, And so for about 3 weeks, I tried to use a PC. I couldn't do it, and I'm like, I'm going back to my Mac, and I switched back to Mac, and haven't tried again since. That's not true. Whenever I want to program my Lutron lighting system, I dust off my HP laptop, right? Because Lutron software only runs on PCs, right? And so I have to dust it off. I got to update all the software, and then I can reprogram my Lutron lighting system.
I enjoy watching the blue screen of death appear in society at large. For example, like on airplanes.
Yeah, on the airplane
airplane screens.
Yeah,
and
yeah, it's ridiculous.
There's even actually an Internet of Things sync they have with a display on it, and that display was running Windows, and it had the BSOD on the just to wash your hands.
Yeah, ridiculous.
A little overkill, maybe.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So HP has sort of.
I mean, so I tried to quit, and Todd goes, no, I want you to stick around and help me with just general PC stuff, because I'm like, I'm not doing the WebOS stuff anymore. You guys, I mean, they screwed up the deal with the carriers. They really didn't get the deal with the carriers. They kind of screwed up the touchpad.
Is it just too painful?
It was just too. It was a big company, slow. It was the reason I left HP the first time. It was no different. Actually, it was much worse. It was much worse. And I was at a much more senior level, right? I mean, it's one thing when you're kind of a engineer architect down in the machine room, right? Shoveling coal. It's different when you're up on the poop deck and and getting pooped on. So I mean, hey, there's an iceberg. Someone do something, right? So I lasted a little longer, and then they started reorganizing the company, and and it became clear I had no business being there. And so Todd said, "Okay, time for you to go." And I'm like, "Great, Todd, thank you." And Todd and I. The one thing that ended up from the whole thing is Todd and I ended up pretty good friends. So, so he let me go, and that was fine. And I moved to Mexico, right? And interestingly enough, I moved to Mexico for 8 months a year. All right, and I started just working out of Mexico.
Still keep a place down in the city?
Yeah, I had an apartment. So long story, but after I finished Mexico, my wife decided we needed a bigger place in San Francisco because the place we had was just for weekends. And so during the 2008-2009 debacle, Merrill Lynch and all that, everything craters. You couldn't give real estate away in San Francisco. And so I bought a spectacular apartment that needed tender loving care. It needed to be gutted. And it took me a while to buy it because the guy had to be convinced that the market wasn't going to get better for a while. And he finally sold it to me, and I'd spent 3 years. I gutted it and redid it all. It's beautiful. So we had that. We had the Mexico place. And I was spending most of my time in Mexico. When we were selling Palm to HP, I got approached by Amazon and wanted to see if I wanted to be a board member. This is like I get a phone call from a recruiter going, "Would you be interested in being an Amazon board member?" And I'm like, is this an intelligence test? I mean, is there multiple choice? I mean, what's the story here? So I said, absolutely. And they went, great. So, I started the interview process. And in the acquisition process, I was clear, with all the people who might acquire us. Look, one of the things I'm going to go do is I'm going to go join the Amazon board if they offer me the position. So Mark Hurd and I asked Mark, I said, can I join a board? He goes, well, we have a policy against senior executives being on boards, but if it's a really good board, I'll let you do it. And he said, what board is it? I said, Amazon. He goes, that's a really good board. All right. So I mean, this was 9 years ago. So it was.
So you were working at HP?
Well, not yet.
Oh.
Right. Not yet. I was interviewing to be on the board, and we were selling HP. All right. So then Hurd gets fired. So my permission goes away. So I finished my interview process at Amazon, and their chief legal counsel goes, okay, we're ready to move forward. I said, I need official permission from Amazon. So she contacts from Apple, from HP, HP's chief legal officer. I go through my management chain, and I'm like, look, I have an agreement on this already. This was pre-acquisition. You guys agreed to this, so I don't know why we need to re-agree, but it went all the way to the board. The board grudgingly said yes, right? And then it was really funny because we weren't supposed to announce it for a couple of months. I get a phone call from the chief legal counsel at Amazon. She goes, I'm announcing this tomorrow. I said, wait a minute, I haven't gotten permission yet. She goes, the fix is in, don't worry about it. You go check it out, but we're announcing tomorrow before they change their mind. So I called, the management chain, and they go, yeah, board approved it. And the next morning they announced I was joining the board. So it's kind of funny. So I've been on the board for 9 years now. It's been amazing. We'll probably get to that in a minute. So through the HP experience, I was on the board. And then when I left HP, I got a call from another recruiter going, would you like to join Qualcomm's board? Right? And obviously I'd been friends with Paul Jacobs for years and knew Paul very well, and I like Paul a lot, and I think that Qualcomm has amazing technology. Right? So I met the rest of the board. They offered me a board seat, so I joined the Qualcomm board. So basically I got two boards. I'm hanging out in Mexico. I'm advising, sort of a dozen startups, CEOs, just sort of coaching and helping them and stuff, and working out of down there. And that's what I did for the next 4 years, basically, 4.5 years.
What kind of duties on, let's say, the Amazon board? Was it very onerous in terms of things, workload? Or
no, it's not bad. I mean, it's much more so now because for the last couple of years I've been lead director, and before that I ran the compensation committee, which takes more time. But initially, no, it wasn't bad. I mean, we meet once a quarter. It's a couple of day meeting. You need a couple of days of prep. There's travel time, and then in between meetings, I spend an hour a day reading, stuff about Amazon, what's going on in the world, stuff about the competition, stuff about the government these days, and what's going on there. So it's probably a quarter-time job, something like that. It takes a bit of time. So I know people who do 4 or 5 boards. I don't know how they do it. Right? I couldn't do 4 or 5 boards. Right? I mean, I'm only on one right now, and that's just Amazon because I got off Qualcomm a couple of years ago. But I tell you, between Qualcomm and Amazon, that was keeping me pretty busy. Right? It's pretty busy. Enough. More
people
than
on
enough.
multiple boards are probably not participating at the level you are.
Possibly. Hard to say.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I have the, both the privilege and the opportunity to contribute on the tech side, and they're both tech companies. So I get much more involved, and I try out products, and I do all that kind of stuff. So it's really fun. The Amazon board's been phenomenal.
How did they, by the way, decide to spin up AWS?
Well, I think they were building AWS for themselves, and decided that other people needed it too, and if they were going to invest in doing it for themselves, they might as well have other customers use it too. I remember they're very customer centric. Everything's customer focused at Amazon, right? So that was sort of Jeff's thing was let's provide this for everyone else too, because we got to do it for ourselves. So if we're going to do it for ourselves, we might as well have everyone else do it too. And that's what they do with third-party marketplace, with shipping, with all that stuff. Is let's build the capability for ourselves, and then let's sell it to our customers. And it's very logical. So it's an amazing business. I think they've done an incredible job.
People's feelings for Amazon, and speaking for myself, are extremely positive.
They love the company. It's a great company.
It really
in every
are.
dimension. It's a great company.
Yeah,
it's been great being on the board.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. And
you mentioned competitors. Do they have any?
Well, they got lots of competitors, right? I mean, Walmart to start with, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of really big competitors. Microsoft. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of competitors, right? I mean, that's just in the U.S. You go overseas, you got Alibaba, you got in India, you got all kinds of stuff. You got in Europe, there's there's a lot. This monopoly thing is so crazy because they're just not, right? I mean, the thing about online sales, start there, right? I mean, you just switch to which website you go to. If you don't want to buy from Amazon, you switch to somewhere else, you buy it somewhere else.
Very
I mean,
true.
there is no lock-in.
Yeah.
There's none.
They just happen to have prime mover advantage.
They
I think.
love the customers love them, right? And they're all about customer satisfaction, and it's about the customers, right? And you look at the, Amazon's core principles, they're so great, those 14 principles.
Oh, I'm not familiar, but I'll look.
Yeah,
those,
you go
I'll
online,
look
they're
those
great.
up.
They're great.
Yeah.
And that's what really drives the company. So
How was working with Jeff Bezos?
it's great.
An
He's so
interesting-
smart,
Ah,
and
yeah.
he's very different than Steve. So I specialize in crazy billionaires, right? So I've worked for a bunch of different of them. I've interacted with several of them, and so it's kind of my specialty. Jeff is phenomenal to work with. He's very, very smart. He's very thoughtful. And while whatever you say may not sink in right away, he thinks about it, and he comes back later and he goes, yeah, I thought about that, right? And he gives credit to other people. I mean, he was on stage, someone asked him about something, and he goes, well, Bing Gordon gave me that, and because Bing was on the board, and at Kleiner Perkins, so he's very generous in that way. And he, he's got a very loyal team that's been with him a really long time, and they're very good at managing. They're very thoughtful about managing. And look, he's a data guy. I mean, he's a quant. He came from D.E. Shaw, quant guys, right? So everything's quant. Everything's about data. It's all data driven. I mean, those guys walk in. Apple, nothing's about data, or maybe now because Tim's running things are about data. But when Steve was running things, nothing about data. There was no ROIs. I mean, Apple, before we got there, had all ROIs. It was all about the business. It was business first, product second, right? And if you ask what's the key thing that we switched at Apple, is we flipped those, and it was the product first, business was second. And Fred would watch the business to make sure it was okay. He'd hide margin. He argues he didn't, but I think he did. He'd bury a couple of points of margin in products where we couldn't find it, and so that when Steve lowered the price, we didn't go bankrupt, and he'd play kind of tricks and stuff. But and look, we had a great finance team, but the company was not a data-driven company. Amazon is. Jeff's a data-driven guy. He's not he's a micromanager, but he also allows people to have their own shops, right? So Steve could never really divisionalize because he needed to control. He needed to be the control point for all the information flow. Jeff's the opposite. He's got different groups. They run their own thing. They're masters of their kingdom. There's a lot of interactions between the groups. They're designed that they have to have communication between them to be successful. So the retail store relies on AWS. There's stuff in AWS that relies on on other groups, and so they're all intertwined just enough to force them to work well together, right? Which I think is really smart. So very different people, but it's great working with Jeff. He's a pleasure, and it's really interesting to watch, his thought processes and how thoughtful he is about things. And he, Steve's brilliance was choosing the fork in the road, right? You'd be going down the road, and Steve wasn't thinking out 3 to 5 years. He was thinking about the next fork, and he was very good at choosing forks, and very good at reacting if we chose the wrong fork, very, very quick at getting us back on track, and very nimble and very flexible. Jeff's the opposite. Jeff thinks, he doesn't want to think about the next fork in the road. He's thinking about the fork in the road a couple of years from now, right? And putting the company on the path to get to that fork a few years from now. And the day-to-day forks are being really chosen by the leaders of the groups. And they screw up sometimes, and they get beat up by Jeff and whatever. But in general, if he likes to operate 3 to 5 years out. Steve never operated that far out. He had a vision of where things were going in general, but we were, he was very serial.
In some ways, which do you think, because technology changes so fast, is one approach better than the other?
I think for doing world-class products, probably the short-term focus is better, right? Big picture, multi-cylinder engine companies, I think the long-term is better. And that's why the two companies are so different from each other, right? Apple's very focused on what the next product is, right? And building, they build the best products in the world, right? And Amazon builds great products, but they're not in the same league, right? That's, really honest, and I'd probably get beat up for that, but it's just truth. right? And you know, Dave Limp's done a phenomenal job of building products that are kind of just underneath Apple's, right? Cost-wise, you know, product-wise, all of that. Because I don't think he.
Who's the
Dave
guy?
Limp runs Amazon, you know, all the Amazon digital stuff.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. He owns Lab 126 and
like
he
the
owns
Kindle and
the Kindle, all the digital stuff.
Alexa and
Yeah, he owns all that.
okay.
Yeah, and he, you know, he used to be at Apple in the old days before I got there, and he's been in a bunch of different companies, but you know, he's a product guy, and he does good stuff, right? But you know, they're not as good as Apple is, right? Apple's the best, and you know, but I think it comes from a different way of thinking about things, and I don't think he would disagree with that, right? I mean, look, there's things that you know Apple hasn't been able to do. They weren't able to do Kindle. They weren't able to do Echo, right? Because they weren't thinking out far enough, right? I mean, Steve's view was nobody reads, right? That's clearly not true, right? And Siri, I don't know what happened with Siri. You know, some of the issues at Apple, I think, are because everyone's in their own silo, right? And Amazon's not that way. They all work together. So you know, you can do an Echo product and work with the Alexa team and kind of have them all work together to make it happen. You know, I'm not sure it would even occur to someone for the Siri team to work with the audio team to build a product like that at Apple. I don't know.
So in the same way that the iPhone works with the App Store and the Music Store, is Alexa's purpose to kind of draw?
Well, they have in effect a store.
Oh, well, that's true.
Right. I mean, they have that. Yes.
Amazon also has its own.
I mean, my view is,
Yes.
is that Alexa is going to be the operating system of the home.
Well, that's what I was wondering is.
And no question. I'm a big IoT thing,
Oh,
and,
okay.
you know, kind of guy, and I've got my Alexa hooked up to my Lutron control system, hooked up to my, you know, to my RTI controller for the TV, and like all this stuff, right? And
When a plane flies overhead, your garage door opens, right?
I don't have a garage. Well, I do have a garage, though, but yeah. So
You get the idea. Yeah.
you know, but I think that Alexa is the interface of the future. I don't think it's going to be the watch or the phone or the a pad on the wall, right? I think it's you walk into a room and you go turn the lights on, right? Or even better, you know, she knows when you walk in the room that you know the last 4 times you walked in the room you told her to do X, Y, and Z. She does the same thing. So if it's 6 o'clock, you walk into the family room. You know, it puts the shades in the right place, it puts the lights in the right place, and it turns on the TV and turns to the channel you'd normally turn to, or, you know, turns to Netflix or Amazon streaming, right? And, you know, it just knows, because you've done it a bunch of times
It's
and it
basically
learns.
the vision that we've had of the automated home for the
For
last
20
50
years.
Well,
Yeah.
even, I would say, like the Jetsons.
Well,
or
yeah, exactly.
Even,
right.
you know.
I mean, when we brought out the
talk
Echo
to your
Show,
appliances.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the Echo Show, when I saw it in the board meeting the first time they showed it, I'm like, great, this is the AT&T video phone. And I brought up the old World's Fair, 1967 World's Fair video from it, right? I mean, you know, because it is, right?
It
It's
is,
great.
but hopefully I think it's more successful.
Well,
but-
no, it actually works, right? Whereas that
Yeah.
one didn't really work. You know?
Right.
So in any case, the Amazon thing's been a great journey. Qualcomm was really interesting. It was tough. I mean, we had a CEO transition. You know, basically, Microsoft tried to hire the number 2 guy, Steve Mollenkopf, and so we had to make him CEO a couple of years before he probably would have been CEO, and Paul stepped out of the role, you know, and then we had an activist, you know, come after us, and you know, and so that caused a lot of drama, and then we had, you know, China coming after us and Korea coming after us, and you know, fighting with Apple, and you know, U.S. government coming after us, and you know, and you know, it got to be. I mean, the board got to be not about the products, and it was about all this other noise, right? And well, you know, I learned a lot, right? I mean, you know, we got all these derivative lawsuits, and I ran the derivative committee, and I learned all about derivative lawsuits and all that stuff, and we had a committee to investigate splitting the company, and you know, I got to do that, and so I learned a lot. I mean, it was all a really valuable experience, and it was interesting, but it wasn't fun.
And it's kind of a distraction.
You know, it's a distraction from the products, and
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, we should be focusing on 5G and you know, and Internet of Things, and you know, all these other things. And
do you think that just because you just mentioned 5G, could let's just call it harassment of Qualcomm have been related to China wanting to move
Of course.
5G into?
Of course.
Okay.
And Intel was behind. Intel was behind a lot of this. Apple was behind a lot of it. No. There's no question. I mean, look, I can't give you a piece of. I mean, you'll read the lawsuits, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the lawsuits you can read about it. But no. I mean, people couldn't compete from a technology point of view with Qualcomm. Their technology was too good, and so they had to compete with them in other ways. And that the ways was using government regulation and antitrust lawsuits and stuff, right? Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. So look, you can get into a whole argument about Qualcomm's licensing stuff, right? And that's a whole discussion, and there's lots of different points of views around that. But the reality is they created the technology, right? I mean, Irwin in the old days created CDMA. Everyone else said, bullshit, GSM is the way to go. They were wrong. Right now, everything's based on CDMA. 5G is amazing. It's going to be incredible. It's going to enable all kinds of good stuff, and it's and it's based on a lot of the work Qualcomm did, right? And they deserve to be really successful because they spent all. I mean, when Paul took over as CEO, the first thing he did was integrate the radios and the processors. I mean, no one had done that before. I mean, it's so you couldn't do the products we have today if you didn't have those, right? It's such an enabling thing. So
the Shark, is that their processor? The Qualcomm?
I don't remember.
Processor?
I mean, they had a whole bunch of processors.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
I thought that was their main one.
No, they got a bunch of them. I mean, they bought the low-end PowerPC group from IBM in Raleigh a bunch of years ago, and those guys they switched to ARM and did their own ARM core, right? And I don't remember what the code names are.
It wasn't the Shark. It was
they got a whole bunch.
Something else.
They got a whole bunch of different.
Snapdragon.
Snapdragon. Yeah,
That's what it
Snapdragon.
was.
They got a whole range of processors and stuff. But look, I mean, the reality is they're just doing better stuff. So it was interesting to be on the board. It was frustrating because we didn't spend time on technology. The beauty of the Amazon board is you spend you have to do your fiduciary duty. You do all the stuff you got to do for the shareholders, SEC, all that kind of stuff. But you spend the bulk of your time thinking about what's the future, and where's the company going, and it's great. So
anything you can tell us about drones?
Yeah, I mean they work great, right? I mean
are they coming?
Yeah, well, I mean the FAA is holding things back right now, right? In this country, in other countries they're already delivering medicine and stuff, and right? But in this country, no, the FAA is look, are they ready for prime time? Probably not quite yet.
Is that a play on words?
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, I'm working with some guys who are doing autonomous drone stuff. Yeah. That more in the consumer range, right? And their stuff's incredible. You take your drone, you throw it up in the air, and it follows you, right?
And they have self-avoiding.
No, it's unbelievable.
Stuff.
You can run through the jungle, and it
avoids everything.
It avoids everything.
Right.
It knows you not because you're wearing a wristband or something. It knows you because it sees you. Wow. Right? It knows what you look like, right? And you're wearing this color, and you got a bald spot on the back of your head, and whatever else, right? So and it follows you, and it's amazing. It's amazing. And so this stuff's all coming. It's just a matter of time, right? I mean, there's a set of issues around battery life and and noise, and Jacobs and I Paul and I used to joke about the fact that once some of these problems are solved, the noise problem, the battery life problem, like every teenage boy is going to have a drone follow them around, just like the Jetsons, right? I mean, wherever they go, there's going to be a drone over their head, sort of following them for a variety of reasons. In any case, but I was on the Qualcomm board, and it was kind of painful, but I'd made a commitment and all that, and so I kept doing that, and then I get a phone call one day from Craig Mundy, and Craig, I'd known Craig for years, so actually all the way back to Ardent, we bought our graphics chip from Craig's company when he was in Boston in those days, and then he'd gone to Microsoft to be CTO, and he was CTO at Microsoft for 20-something years. He tried to hire me a couple of times to come and do hardware at Microsoft, and I never bit on that. But so I mean, we weren't really friends, but we knew each other. And he called me up and he goes, I'm working at this, I'm advising this hedge fund, and they're looking for a co-CEO, a technology co-CEO, not to buy technology, but to manage technology. It's a quant fund, and they do massive amounts of technology, and they need someone to help manage it and to take them into the sort of the next generation. And I'm like, that's crazy. I don't know anything about finance, right? I mean, what do I know? And he goes, no, like this is going to be really interesting. I've been spending a whole bunch of time there the last couple of years. Why don't you come out and visit? So I went out and I talked to them. I spent a bunch of time talking to them. I spent a bunch of time with Craig, and my conclusion was that the computerization of Wall Street, or the Silicon Valley computerization of Wall Street, was about to occur, or was occurring. So in the past, I mean, they've used tons of computers, but they use the sort of consultant version of computers. They hire these big consulting groups, and they do these big waterfall projects, and it's just the consultant view of the world, right? And there was a transition going to sort of the Silicon Valleyization of technology in finance. And I thought, you know what? That's something I've never done before. It's interesting. It'll give me an opportunity to be an AWS customer, right? So it gives me to get to see it from the other. I mean, I've watched AWS grow up from the inside Amazon point of view. I get to be a customer, so that's kind of cool. I get to learn stuff about finance, right? And so that's kind of cool because I don't really know much about finance. And I get to help a company really advance their technology base to what's possible, because what's possible today is amazing. And we went back and forth, and I watched lots of videos about the culture there, and it's probably my fault because I thought, it can't really be this bad. We talked a lot, and so the structure was supposed to be, I was co-CEO, and then there was two other people. That the guy who was the current CEO was going to step down into co-CEO, and then there was a woman who ran operations, and she was going to be co-CEO. It was going to be the three of us. And so he was kind of CIO, she was operations, and I would be technology. And the three of us would be the co-CEOs running the company. And that kind of made sense. And Craig was going to be, co-chairman, along with Ray Dalio. So Ray and Craig were, so Craig was the technology security chairman, and Ray was the investing chairman, and that would kind of be the structure, and there's about 2,000 people at the company, and I had, I had half the company, right, something like that, because it's 1,000 technology people there, right? It's a lot of software written. So that was the concept, and so everyone thought, another one of those. Are you crazy? Why would you ever go there? And they turned out to be right in this case, but for the wrong reason. So I got there, and it was pretty obvious pretty immediately that it was a bad culture fit. Right, that I was not going to fit into Ray's principles, based culture, right? And my argument with Ray was, if you read Ray's latest book, look, Ray's brilliant, no question about it. His perspective is the culture is the reason why the company's successful. And my answer to that is, gee, Ray, how do you know? You've never run the experiment both ways, all right? That's one. Number two, I said, look, I understand why you think you need to run research, the core of the investment engine, with your management principles, but I don't understand why technologists should be running with those, because you manage technologists in a different way. And so we basically just didn't agree on how to do things, right? And the other thing is while I was gone, he demoted, between when I signed up and when I arrived, he demoted Greg. Big drama, because it was like his son, and lots of drama. And he took over as co-CEO. So it was him and me and the woman who ran operations, which was really weird because it meant he was really CEO and I was kind of CTO. And then Craig left, and Craig came back as an advisor. I mean, it was just a lot of drama, and I didn't get anything done. I was there 11 months, and I didn't accomplish anything. I learned a lot, but I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't agree with the principles. I'm not a religious guy, and it's a religion. And my point to Ray was, if you read his latest book, he's got 375 principles. And I'm like, Ray, Toyota, 14 principles. Amazon, 14 principles. Yeah. The Bible, 10 principles. 375, that's not principles, that's an operating system. It's an instruction manual, right? And so I just didn't fit in. And we, I didn't feel like I could get anything done. And I felt bad about it, but I just couldn't do it.
It does have a reputation as a very difficult,
very high turnover.
Very
high turnover, very crazy place. And look, for the right people, if they love it, more power to them, right? And look, they're incredibly successful. They are the largest hedge fund in the world. Their returns, given the size of the portfolio they're managing, are incredible. Ray's a really, really smart guy. I think he's a little nuts, but And you got to judge for yourself. You got to read his stuff, right, and decide if you like, I mean, people like Scientology, right? That's, it's a personal choice thing. So I'm not a religious guy. It's not the religion for me, right? I'm a computer guy. That's my religion, I guess. I don't know. But whatever, it didn't work out, and I was smart enough or sensitive enough to know that it wasn't going to work out, and I needed to get out. And so it took a couple months. I gave him. I didn't do I quit, this stinks kind of thing. I, gave him plenty of notice, and we worked out a transition plan, and then I left the company. And I mean, they're so used to high turnover that, I mean, the guy before me, like they thought he was a bozo, and now he's running GE. So I mean, maybe he is a bozo. I don't know.
Oh,
right, but
the new CEO?
The new CEO, GE, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But he wasn't a cultural fit either,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But in any case, I had to get out of there. It wasn't for me. But my premise for going there was a good one. So I got back I moved back to California. I was living in Connecticut, which I didn't love either. And I mean, my idea was I'd live in Connecticut, I'd be close enough to New York. I grew up in New York. I'd go hang out in New York with my friends. But then I ended up working 7 days a week again, because Ray would give homework assignments on Friday afternoon that were due on Monday morning. So I mean, we got homework assignments. I'm co-CEO of like the largest hedge fund in the world, and I got homework assignments, of which I fail because my principles are different than Ray's principles. So it was kind of silly. But the basic concept was not wrong. And then I get back to California, and a couple months goes by, and I get a reach out from a company called PDT Partners, and from a guy named Pete Mueller. And Pete's the CEO of PDT Partners. And PDT used to be part of Morgan Stanley, and when the Volcker rule kicked in, they had to spin out of Morgan Stanley, so that they would, basically they'd been prop trading proprietary internal money for Morgan Stanley. They spun out. And now they're kind of do their own money and a couple other customers, but it's a small shop. It's 200 people. Half the people are technologists, and
Sorry, how would you describe their firm? What they do?
they make money.
No, but I mean, is it called like
It's a quantitative trading firm.
Okay.
So it's all computerized.
Hedge fund? Would that
It's a
be?
hedge fund.
Okay.
It's a hedge fund. It's a quant hedge fund.
Okay.
They develop algorithms that run on the computers. That then, every day the market has data. They crunch enormous. They have a huge grid computer, which they basically went to Livermore Labs. They go, a dummy's guide to supercomputing. They download that. They build a grid computer with InfiniBand and all of that. And, they got, I don't know, 20,000 nodes or something. And we're talking about major horsepower.
Do you know a guy called D.E. Shaw?
Yeah, well, that's where all these guys came from. That's where Jeff Bezos used to work.
Okay, because we are getting one of their computers. I forget what it's called, but it's for molecular simulations.
Yeah,
that's all it does.
But that's all he does now. Yeah. In the old days, he used to do quant hedge fund.
Yeah.
That's where his money comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you dropped your money.
Yeah, that's very interesting that they're sort of related.
Yeah, no, all these guys came out of D.E. Shaw.
And sort of are the 2,000 people at
Bridgewater.
are they like engineers or programmers or
Yeah, it's a funny,
analysts? Or?
Yeah, no, there's a whole bunch of Harvard Business School people, a lot of economists. I mean, because the core of the engine is long-term economics. It's not really short-term quant. So it's a very different kind of firm. They look at trends, market trends in the 160 markets they trade, right? So it's different. Wow. But they use a lot of computer power. I mean, they got algorithms, and they run computer simulations, and they do portfolio creation and all that using computers. So they use a lot of horsepower too. It's just a different
and
kind of thing.
Microseconds count in those.
Yeah, not so much at a company like Bridgewater. Bridgewater's a different kind of hedge fund, right? The quant guys, so Renaissance, D.E. Shaw, Two Sigma, PDT, those guys are all, massive horsepower, and predict what the market's going to do, all right, kind of thing, like on a short term. Yeah. So any case, I got involved with them. I'm an advisor to them. We've been doing a cloud migration on AWS. It's going awesome. We've rebuilt the engineering team. We brought a new head of engineering and all that stuff, and it's been really, really fun. So I think my point of proof around this is that my original concept of Silicon Valleyizing finance in New York is the right one, right? And the it's just that I was in the wrong place because we're going gangbusters right now, and it's going really, really well, and everybody's happy, and it's opening up lots and lots of opportunity to be able to, deal with a lot more. I mean, we're dealing with a huge amount of data, and we can deal with a lot more data. And I mean, these are big compute problems, big data problems, and it's really fascinating. And I can't talk about anything because it's all proprietary, right? And super secret because it's all about intellectual property.
Well, the turning data, which is in some ways has some noise inherent into it, into wisdom, is kind of what these systems do.
That's exactly right.
Actionable intelligence.
Yeah, exactly right.
From this huge inchoate mass of data.
Of just this massive inflow of
tidal
data.
wave.
Tidal wave. It really is. It's really fascinating. So I'm having a good time with that. As part of my joining Bridgewater as co-CEO, Ray wanted me to get off all the boards. I hedged on the, so to speak, on the Amazon board, but I did get off of Qualcomm. So when I joined Bridgewater, I stepped off of that. So these days I'm doing the New York hedge fund thing, which is great. I'm a big AWS customer, not big, but I'm a reasonable size AWS customer. I'm on the Amazon board where I get to see AWS from the other side. I still have a handful of startups I work with, doing interesting things.
Do you provide financing or more advice?
No, I'm more of the advisor.
Yeah.
I'm a shitty investor, right? I mean, I'm just not good at investing. I just don't have it's just not what interests me, right? So I'd much rather be advising on management, product strategy, those kind of things.
Technology.
Right. I'm good at choosing technologies. I'm good at building management teams. I'm good at systems. Right, both management systems, development systems, and products, right? And so I tend to focus around that, and help people, do those things. So I think my customer base is pretty happy. I got a handful of startups that the CEOs are happy with the help I've given them, and
I'm sure they're pretty grateful
yeah,
that you are.
So it's fun. So I keep my hand on that. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days.
Any hobbies or interests before we wrap up?
Well, I'm going back to try to learn to play golf.
Oh yes, you mentioned.
Which is really hard. I mean,
right.
It was one of those things where it is so far out of my comfort zone. Right. So I think it's important that occasionally you go and do something that's out of your comfort zone, right? Because it completely realigns your outlook on life when you do that.
You realize you're living in a very comfortable world.
Yeah, where you're kind of good at things and whatever. I mean, I run and I bike and I do yoga and, stuff like that, Pilates, whatever, right? But I've never done sports, right? Basketball, baseball, tennis, none of that, golf, none of that. I mean, I never held a golf club. And it just sort of, I needed something to do down in Mexico. I tried surfing, didn't like that. Tried stand-up paddleboarding, didn't like that. I tried the golf thing, and that kind of clicked.
Fishing?
And it's so far out of my comfort zone, it's so far from anything I'm good at, that it was kind of a challenge. And I think it's been really good, like both psychologically for me, to really work on something that I kind of suck at, right? And get better. I mean, I can see slow progress. It's very slow progress, but I'm getting better. And I've made lots of new friends. And one of the things about being here in Silicon Valley is it's very ingrown, right? I mean, it's a group of people constantly interacting. And yeah, I mean, you get new people coming in because the younger generation takes over and whatever. But but it's very insular. Silicon Valley, San Francisco, all of that, and
at the senior levels too. I think
especially right.
It's very interconnected.
And so it's given me an opportunity to meet a whole bunch of people that are in completely different worlds. Which is fascinating because you get to learn about stuff that you never would have learned about
over a golf game.
Over a golf game. So that's been really good. So that's been one of my challenges and really fun. And I'm always keeping an eye out for some. I mean, I spend a lot of time on Internet of Things and kind of watching what's going on in the world and I'm very bullish on what's happening right now. So so I'm excited about what's coming and something will come along that's really going to be interesting, and I'll jump on that. And I mean, I won't go run it because I think I'm kind of past that now, right? And I got too many interests to focus on one thing, and I like getting, as we were talking about before, I like getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Yeah. So the 7 days a week, 18-hour days, those days are over for me. I can't do that anymore. As much as I loved it, and it was, you know, I mean, Steve used to always tell the groups, this will be the high point of your life. And I was thinking to myself, God, I hope not, right? Because that's really a sad way to think of it. I mean, what he was trying to do is get everyone really invigorated. It's okay to work, 18-hour days, 24 hours a day 7 days a week for months and months and years or whatever. And, when you look back, it'll be the crowning moment of your life. And I don't look at it that way. I look at it, that was phenomenal. And what we accomplished, particularly what Steve and I accomplished together is amazing. And even with other groups of people, we've done, great work everywhere. Even the stuff that wasn't successful, it's been so phenomenal. But I don't think any of it is like, the highest point of my life. Because I always look forward to what's coming next. And I think the acceleration of technology is phenomenal. And so it's all very exciting and interesting. And this place, coming back to the Computer Museum, I've been hanging out here, I think, since late 80s, early 90s or something. Not this facility per se, but I've been hanging around the museum. I think it's so important, like what goes on here, and what you guys are looking at for the future, of sort of making it bigger than just a bunch of old computers and crusty computer guys, right? And sort of the bigger picture, the education part. One of the things I really push with everybody, especially the kids I run into, is STEM is so important, right? Because it doesn't matter what field you go into in the future, right? But having a feel, for technology is so crucial to everything that's going to happen in the future. And it's so important that people, get that skill and capability and the ability to do computer stuff, whatever that is, right, is essential.
I agree. I wish this country would reinvigorate its attitude from the 60s when science and engineering were really kind of, the whole nation was on board.
The National Academy, I'm honored to be a member of the National Academy of Engineering. And the National Academies, I helped with one report, but the National Academy's done a variety of reports about how important STEM is, and
science
and the
literacy.
future of work and all of that. And there's there's probably done by now half a dozen reports that give the path, right? And talk about how to make this work. And the government kind of looks at this stuff and doesn't really pay any attention, which is too bad.
I see basic science literacy as fundamental to democracy.
Exactly right.
People are easily swayed if they don't know, if they can just be told any nonsense.
Right. That was an interesting thing because one of Ray's big things is to question, what is true, right? And I have to say that's one of the things I learned from Ray, right? Is it used to be people would say stuff to me and I'd go, okay, well that sounds a little funny, but okay, whatever. They must know what they're talking about. And now, whenever I hear something, I think to myself, okay, I can hear Ray's voice. Well, what is true? Because as an investor, right, knowing what is true is really important.
There's a lot of noise.
And you can't make any assumptions.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's one of his principles. I think that he has. Look, there's a couple of dozen of his principles that I think are really profound, and there's a bunch of them that don't make any sense. But that is such an important thing. I think that what is true, and I think you need to have a background in technology and science and whatever, to be able to ask that.
Right. And so, final question for you.
Yeah.
If you had any advice or encouragement for kids who are interested in science or engineering, what would you tell them?
Well, do it. Just do it. Go to science camp. Like I did, the golf camp's probably fun, but go to science camp, and take science in school, and you don't have to major, in science necessarily, but you should learn about how it impacts whatever it is you're really interested in, right? And no matter what, you're going to be using computer science, right? That's just one way or another. You're going to be using computers in whatever you do. You're going to be interacting with computers in whatever you do. The home is going to become. You're going to become computerized, right? They're going to build in something in your head to, that you can control your computer from your head and from your arm or whatever, right? And it's going to be ubiquitous. It's getting close, right? I've always thought this. And so when we did the Nike plus iPod thing, to me that was sort of the first consumer, widespread consumer, computerization of people, right? Instrumentation of people.
Oh, yes.
Right. It was the first step.
Like the
right?
quantified self thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, now I'm fully. I mean, I got this, and I got an app that tracks what state I'm in, so California can't tax me, and I got an app that tracks me.
Interesting.
I got an app that tracks my runs, and an app that tracks my bike riding and yoga and my golf game, and and all this data gets dumped up to the cloud, and I can look at where I've been and what I've done and how I've done it and how well I've done it and all that stuff. It's all quantified and it's up in the cloud, and that's just the beginning. All right, that's just the beginning.
My final question is, how important is it for kids to take stuff apart as a way of learning?
I don't think it's crucial, right? Because you could argue that if you're a computer science, if you're just on the software side of things, that's not a skill you need to have. I mean, there's brilliant software people that have no clue how to change the oil in their car, right? Whereas if you're a mechanical or electrical type, you ought to know all that stuff, right? I mean, you should be able to do all that, right? Maybe not in a modern car because they're impossible or they're electric, so you can't do it. But so if you're in the physical sciences, I think that's really good, right? If you're a little kid and your proclivity is to being a software type, you ought to be tearing in all the different software stuff. And if you're a systems person, because a lot of stuff is about systems, you ought to understand both. Right.
Okay, well, thank you, Jon.
It was my pleasure.
Anything else you'd like to
No,
say?
I think you guys are doing a great job, and I'm excited to be part of the museum and having been a part for many, many years, and I hope this video goes for some kind of use in the future. Who knows, right? But I think that's fun, and I mean, maybe we can do this again in another 10 years, and we'll see what the next 10 years. I mean, look, I'm excited about what's coming.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm excited about the future, and I think the world we live in is an incredibly exciting place.
10 years from now, the world is going to be a different place.
Completely different.
It's going to be a very different place.
Completely different.
Even climate-wise.
Well, no, that's right.
If nothing else.
Yeah, it's going to be vastly different, and
I feel that's the problem that actually all of humanity should be focused on is climate change.
Yeah. Well, it's
otherwise we're not going to be around if we don't solve that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I mean, there's some people who think we should all be moving to higher ground right now, right? And there's other people that are sort of doing the fountainhead thing, of wanting to build separate communities and stuff, and I don't know, whatever. Yeah. It's interesting, but the world's going to be very different in 10 years, and and there's lots of bumps along the road. There's no question about it, and there's really big problems that need to get solved. But I'm very bullish on technology and science, and and where that's going to take us, and that that it's all really positive.